Okay, I think we're ready.
Yeah.
Send you live now, Claire.
Good morning and welcome to the board meeting of Sherwood Forest Hospitals Trust. I'd like to start first of all with asking if there's any declarations of interest. Not aware of any additional ones. Apologies for absence. I think it's just non-executive director Dr. Ali Rashid. Yep, that's fine. Minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of April. Can we agree those as a pre-record? Yes, thank you very much. And I don't think there's anything on the action tracker or action log that isn't already covered on the board papers. Okay, moving on swiftly then to Chair's report. I'll take that as read and highlight again the very first issue, which is that we will shortly be going out to election for our new governors, for additional new governors, fill those vacancies that we currently have. Myself and the lead governor had a really successful session online the other day, talking to members of the public who may be interested in becoming governors and standing to be governors. And we have another session in a couple of weeks' time. But I do hope that that will bring forward a lot of people who are interested in joining and supporting our trust. And just to highlight again that we have our Excellence Awards coming up here on the 5th of July, the 75th anniversary of the NHS, so a really good day. And I know that whilst nominations have closed, I understand that there's been a huge response from within the organisation to recognise our colleagues. If there are no other questions or comments on Chair's report, I will hand over to our Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Again, you've got my report. I'll just cover some key points. Thanks to everyone within the trust who safely planned and stepped up to ensure services ran, essential services continued and patient safety was maintained through the recent industrial action. We're working really hard to minimise disruption to patient care and ensuring that appointments go ahead as soon as possible. And with this week's news around the Staff Council's agreement to the NHS pay award, when we got the details on that, we'll of course translate that as soon as we possibly can. Just moving on to other items in the report, I was delighted to attend the second step into the NHS recruitment event at Vision West Notts College last week. There was a real buzz in the air. Lots of people signed up and attended, and we actually recruited 10 new colleagues on the night. So we interviewed and appointed 10 colleagues whilst the event was taking place. So fantastic, and lots of other expressions of interest were made by those attending. On further exciting news, we've received 2 key planning permissions over the last month. So firstly, for the Community Diagnostic Centre at Mansfield Community Hospital, and additionally for the car parking spaces that will be in addition to the Newark Hospital car parking offer. My report also notes some key partnership meetings held over the month where we discussed how we can work together on some key common agendas, and really importantly, one of those being the violence and aggression points that our staff continue to raise through the staff survey. Additional to that, the Risk Committee has reviewed the Board Assurance Frameworks, Principal Risk 6 and 7, with no suggested change to ratings. And lastly, Shirley Higginbottom, our Director of Corporate Affairs, retires later this month, and this is the last board meeting that Shirley will be present for. I'm sure we'll all agree Shirley's made a vital contribution to the trust and indeed the smooth running of the board, and we thank her so much for everything that you've done, Shirley, and we'll miss you so much as well. All that, the guiding principles, the guiding hand, and that wagging finger that's necessary. So thanks for Shirley. And as Shirley leaves, we prepare to to welcome Sally Brooke Shanahan. I'm really pleased that Sally's been able to join us today in an observer role, and Sally will be in the role of Corporate Affairs Director at the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a good journey. I've enjoyed it. Thank you all for your support in the last 10 years. Thank you.
She'll have a new right hand. Right. Okay, thank you. Anything on the executive's report? If not, let's move on to strategic priorities, Q4 update. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much. Morning, everybody. Nice to see you. So here in the pack of papers, you've got the 22-23 priorities, the Q4 closing position, and final updates on that year's set of strategic priorities. There are, I think, my summary, a mix of real successes with tangible evidence of delivery. So I'll pick out particularly the green agenda and the green plan that's delivered really well across many aspects. I think we should highlight the health and wellbeing and people metrics, as well as delivering on some real tangible benefits to the organisation. There are some that have delivered and will move into business as usual. So I think friends and family is a good example of that, where there's a clear governance route for that to be reported into, and transparency around the responsibility that's allocated to seeing that through. And any that remain outstanding areas of work, we have built into the 23-24 strategic priorities that board signed off last time. And one example of those is the medically safe for transfer, which is clearly baked into our annual plan for this year, and obviously was some of the work that was presented at the workshop last time. So I'm satisfied that we've presented to you the closing down of those priorities for 22-23, and we already have signed off the priorities for 23-24. Thank you.
Great.
Just the only comment, because you show us an upward change to previous quarter for 5.1 on the transformation and efficiency. It's showing flat, which it should do, and that's primarily driven. The good news was we hit our PIP target. The bad news was it was virtually all non-recurrent and raised in Finance Committee, so which is an issue. Showing an improvement, I think, is probably the wrong message.
Yeah. Fair comment. Thank you.
Okay. Andy.
So I think there has been some real success, David, in bits of the programme. So I think what you just described there is a soft impact description. And I just wondered for some of these whether there's merit in having a slightly harder look at impact, maybe the ones where it's not gone to plan, so that we don't just pass on things that aren't going so well into next year's priorities. I don't know how we manage that transition in a way that gives us some visibility about whether we're doing the right thing, we just need to do more of it, or we need to rethink where we are. Just interested in views on that around the table.
Yeah, thanks. David, could you just describe how we've captured the learning, but also those maybe outstanding issues in the 22-23 delivery of priorities and into the 23-24 and beyond? So, understanding the dynamics there, Andy, and not leaving behind those things that either were partly complete or in a softer measurement we think we did okay in delivery, but actually the intent that we had behind them, are we maintaining that focus on? And that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, thank you. So Kevin Gallagher and Boy Sand in my team have done a bottom-up, top-down review of all of these schemes. And that's what, in essence, informs some of our priority thinking. And the feedback they've had from the respective executive leads and the subcommittees that these report into have then shape the thinking for the 23-24 priorities. So I'm not sure we've left anything out in those priorities. I think it's all baked in. I think, you know, one of the challenges for us as we go into 23-24 as increasingly is, do we continue to have a soft feel to these, or do we build in a numerical success or criteria to some of these? And I think some of them you can and some of them you won't be able to. So clearly want some of the things that are around hearts and minds, around transformation, improvement, culture, you know, we'll go through the relevant subcommittee, but clearly some of the things around transformation and FIP and picking up Graham's point, clearly there's hard numerical data that goes with that as well. So I think there'll be a balance going into 23-24.
Rachel.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to come back to Andy's point, but just on that, I think absolutely. And in next year's priorities, we've tried to be really clear about the metrics that we're monitoring too. So particularly around things like medically safe, for example, there are some very clear measurable metrics around both the medically safe themselves, but the impact on the bed occupancy and so on that we have in there that we can measure. The point I was going to make is around your point around impact. I think I've struggled with this a little bit because obviously, if you take it's 1.4, which is the medically safe one. When I was doing the dial for this, I very much wanted to push it into the red. But the way we've designed it, it's around, you know, are there issues and are you taking significant action? Well, absolutely. There's a huge amount of action happening on this across both within Sherwood and across the system. But what it's not doing is having the impact that we need it to. But I don't think the way we rate these allows us to measure that impact factor. So that just might be something to think about going into next year, I think.
Yes, Steve.
Thank you. Yeah, just following on what David was saying. Wanted to ask specifically about the EPMA rollout, which in the context of the last few years and being a big digital program, the lack of noise is success in itself. It makes a comment about optimisation, potentially difficulty to workforce gaps in the commentary, but it also struck me during that conversation that's one of those key areas where we could actually at some point during this year be saying, okay, well, whether it's this year or next year, how did we do numerically? You know, what have we achieved? Rolling it out in itself is a success, but actually what difference has it made to safety, to people's lives, and to the money? I'm just suggesting that's one area we could come back to as a board. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, and I think your comments about the lack of noise is really interesting, and as you say, for a big project. So there's a whole host of things in that, isn't there? There's taking the learning from that project. So I don't know if you remember, but we did have some trickiness where we had a bit of a delay about 6 months into the project, and so we took that time to have an external fresh eyes review on that about actually what have we done in terms of the planning and the initial progress. So we did that sort of inter-project review. Mm-hmm. Now all of these projects come, when they've gone through the business statement, they all come with critical success factors, KPIs, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. I think going back to Rachel's point and to Andy and David's point, some of those mean more than others. So as you say, the key critical success factor is, did we roll it out? Does it work? Tick. Yes. Mm-hmm. Actually, has it made the difference for our patients? What are the safety aspects? What is the quality markers that we've done? And that's harder to translate, particularly into support the business case in terms of a financial envelope in terms of that. But we do constantly review this within some of our subcommittees. So it comes to the risks now come through quality committee, mm-hmm. and we've got the risks coming as we move from the project to business as usual. They come into the standing item on PSC, and I think we'll see more of that coming. So what I might suggest for something like that is that we do sometime in the next financial year, as we bring a paper back that describes the learning and the benefits, and this will of course feed into our next big digital project in terms of EPR about what we've done and how we've done that. So very happy to take that as an action.
Good, thank you. May I follow
Yes, can I just remind people to speak up because otherwise public can't actually hear very well.
Thank you. Just as a follow-on, it's probably a question for Rich and maybe something I don't know about. Do we have a standard approach where we've invested a significant amount in a programme or a building or an improvement that allows us to do what they've just been describing? So is that a systematic thing, or what should it be?
Definitely should be. Is it a systematic thing? So I think we've had various different approaches to that over a period of time. So something we had a meeting earlier this week actually about was refining the process around that, just to make sure that we are ensuring that there's routine monitoring through that. We do tend to, larger cases, we do tend to ensure that they're on a particular committee's work plan.
Yeah.
So for example, the recent capital cases around the Community Diagnostic Centre, around the TIF build, are on the work plan for the Finance Committee, and we also get regular updates through the executive team.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Just wanted to build on that, Rich, and it was just a discussion we had beforehand on whether it makes sense for us to have a look at post-implementation reviews, to have that as a standing item on the agenda, and then forward plan the ones that have already happened, just to when we might look at them going through, and obviously updating as we go through the year. But that way it kind of forces it onto the agenda. It knows that we're going to have a look at that post-evaluation review.
I agree with that. Through the Finance Committee.
Yeah.
We're thinking, yeah, and then it feed through to this through our board report.
Okay.
I think what I was going to say has been stolen by which is answered it. But yes, I'd welcome that to come to the Finance Committee so we can do post project reviews on the larger ones, not every single project.
Yeah, no, because the larger ones
really matter, starting with the transformation programme and efficiency programme.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Thank you for the list of acronyms.
Yes.
Very helpful.
The acronyms work for members of the board as well as members of the public.
Yeah. I agree.
Done that a long time ago. Okay, nothing else on that. We are going to move on to strategic objective 1, provide outstanding care, and we have a maternity update. Paula, are you coming to join us?
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'll start by saying tomorrow is International Day of the Midwife, so there are quite a few midwifery items on the agenda. I'd like to say it was deliberately planned. It wasn't, but we'll make no apologies and join us in thanking our midwifery colleagues and those that support them. And we'll make sure there's plenty of celebrations and recognition tomorrow.
Yep, that's kind.
So if we move on to the first paper, Maternity Safety Champions update. Just to note, there was quite a period of disruption in some of our structured forums and walkarounds due to industrial action planning, etc. However, they were all rearranged and took place. And if anything, there's probably more visibility, more senior leadership presence during that period. Again, team's very positive at the moment. There's a real good feel on there. People describe themselves that they're starting to see some of the impact of some of the changes and things that we've worked on with them, such as the staffing levels, engagement forums. A bit of that you said we did. We're able to demonstrate a bit more of that. So there's certainly a very positive feeling there. Despite that, remains busy and challenging. A couple of key things to point out. You should be aware that we were unable to submit full compliance with the NHSR. I've made the board aware of that. However, we submitted a bid for some funding which has been successful. We've not yet heard how much or when we'll receive that, but that's certainly more positive than the picture was a couple of months ago. In terms of CQC must-do actions, they're progressing really well. Monitoring those through Maternity Assurance Committee and Quality Committee. Two of note are appraisal rates now well above 90% with a robust plan to maintain that. And the change to the new urban triage system, again, it's progressing well and we should have a go live in June. But we'll continue to monitor those, as I say, monthly. We're still not clear on how the single delivery plan is going to be measured and monitored, and that's been given to the system chief nurses and the LMNS to come up with how that's going to function. I think myself and Paul are really keen that we don't lose the focus and the way we've managed the Ockenden recommendations and the other essential actions that we've taken. So we'll continue as is, doing what we think and know are the right things until we hear all the eyes and how that's going to be captured. I think I said last board, if anything, it's a little bit woolly, and we were hoping something a bit more clear and concise that pulled all these important pieces of work and reports together. Not quite got that yet, but I think we're in a position with our system colleagues to make sure we come up with something that works for us and our organisation, importantly our families. I'm just going to pass over to Paul. It's probably worth just pulling out a few key bits around the service user voice and the QI work, which I think is always worth sharing with the board.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sarah Seddon, who is our Parents' Voice champion, she has produced a fantastic report, which we're just looking at the action plan for now. We'll bring that back to board, but this month we've produced her flash report, which just details really what the activity has happened within the division this month. She's working on some really key projects, one namely being opening visiting up for birthing partners on the maternity ward. So she's done some really key focus work around that for us, and it's really helped us to shape how we're going to enact that. So absolutely fantastic work that Sarah's done, and that's detailed within the report. The QI work that we're doing relates to, and you'll see that within the scorecard, it's the National Maternity and Neonatal Safety Improvement Programme, working alongside the actions from that, and then also the Saving Babies Lives Care Bundle is ways in which we can reduce adverse outcomes and perinatal mortality. So one of what we're able to report this year is that we've been able to maintain our stillbirth rate below the national average again, and that has gone against the national picture, which has seen an increase. We're not sure why nationally that's increased, and there's work ongoing around that, but Sherwood we're able to say ours has gone down again, and it is that engagement with these key programmes and looking at those measures and those deliverables. So within the report is really detailed what the team have been doing, and they're doing some absolutely fantastic work, and it's understanding locally what our data showing is, what our women are saying, and how we can improve our services around that. So yeah, they've been doing some fantastic work. It's nice that we've got this really cross-divisional with our neonatal services, but also our theatre colleagues as well. So it's about bringing those into this team and how we can deliver. So it's been like Phil says, a busy month from an industrial action perspective. It's been great for us because it's allowed us to have a little bit more time to be out there and see our team. So
I think why those two things are really key though in the new 3-year delivery plan. If you look at some of the headings in there, the first one is listening and working with women and their families. You look at stuff within that, we're way ahead of how we do that. And Sarah and are exemplars in that. So I think we're in a really strong position with that. And that's really important. We listen to that and what we do with it. And then one of the other key bits is about that culture of safety, learning and support. And again, our teams for many years have been at the forefront, leading and driving some of that. So there's some stuff in the delivery plan that we're really strong at, and we've been in a really good position to deliver.
Yeah, and it's so we've already started the engagement work with the system, and it's about ourselves and Nottingham looking at what our key priorities are, because we're not sure yet what resource, what support will come nationally. So we need to look at what we're doing already well and how we've embedded that, and then the areas that are our key priorities. So that will go through exec partners, and then we can bring it back through to Maternity Assurance Committee.
I think what's clear is it won't come with the same financial support that the Ockenden programmes did. So it's going to be a key point on how we can resource and deliver that. I'll just move on to the scorecard then and have to take questions. Again, a few key points. Home birth service, we're at 17 home births now, unless we've had another one since we spoke.
I think we might have actually.
Importantly, the electives there in section list, which again, board are well cited on. From this week, we increased that to 4 a week. Really positive improvement, both in terms of the quality and the safety and the staff experience. And that's one of the things when I said we do the walkarounds, they'll tell you this straight away. Huge achievement, and that's done cross-divisionally, some really good teamwork in, as you mentioned before. Our obstetric hemorrhage positions improved second month, as has the 3rd and 4th degree tear, both things the board will be aware we've focused on previously. And also this month launched our Opal scoring tool, which is how we manage capacity management in organisations already. It's bringing the maternity into that process as well, so it helps with escalation, triggers and response from both region and nationally. So again, a real piece of work. Is there anything you want to add?
No, just to update really on the Ockenden initial 7 IEA. So we had our panel the end of last week, so just prior to me writing the scorecard, and that our final piece of evidence has been accepted, so we're now 100% compliant. So that will go through exec partners this time round, and then what we will do is we're working on with the system now how we make sure these are embedded, and this will form part of the LMNS's annual review of our services. So we've got I've got a team working on this, so looking at how we can make sure that they're embedded and become business as usual rather than something that we submit evidence for each year. So very clear actions, and the LMNS were pleased with the progress and obviously the actions and the formats, the meetings that we've taken. So yeah, really positive meeting.
To take questions or comments.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to join you in congratulating Sarah Fedden for yet another great piece of work that she's done in talking to parents and to families around that. I suppose in terms of the information that comes to the maternity safety champions, that communication piece is absolutely crucial. And I think we need to collectively think about how we improve those communications and what we can do, perhaps in terms of discussion with staff about why they feel. Is it a stress issue? Is there challenges within the unit that are coming out? But what it is that's behind some of those responses that Sarah's picked up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that's one of the things we've asked Sarah to really focus on, because the action plan that we've collated brings the CQC annual maternity survey, so the annual women's survey. So we're putting all the findings together and looking at how we can do that. There's a big focus around that communication. I think a lot of this is around that continuity of teams, and when you're really ensuring that you have the same midwife and the same obstetrician, so that communication is not lost, and that's often the big feature. So we see that in clinics, particularly when they're busy, overbooked clinics, and we know that's a problem within maternity services, because we have, if you need an appointment at 36 weeks, we have 5 days to deliver it. This year is a bit more challenge with all the extra bank holidays. We have less days to deliver. So it's about how can we ensure that continuity, so these women are seeing the same people and having that same conversation. And so there's a big focus around the communication stream around that. We're also looking at how we can maximise our digital. So we know we're with digital notes now. And there's a lot of communication we can send out quite readily on there, and it can be made available in multiple languages, for example. And we can signpost women more readily to external charities, etc., that can support. So it's about, we need to maximise the digital that we've got. So Sarah and the MVP are looking at that as a system-wide action, because we know this is a much wider issue around particularly the information available.
Thank you. Angie.
Yes, thank you. It was really good to see the achievements and the scorecard, so really positive. Thank you to everyone. I particularly also liked the quality improvement poster you've got, because again, you know, it's making visible the faces and the names as well, so that was positive. But also sometimes when we talk about what's the impact, it had covered that as well in terms of the project and what's happening, so really felt tangible in terms of tangible impact for improvement. My question was, for the next report, is it possible to see more on the health inequality side and some of that analysis of unmet need and what we're doing around that, and some of the evidence, and also what we may be doing with partners in the area in terms of what they could do as well?
Yeah, so I'm more than happy. So one of the big projects that we've worked on, and I know that Sarah and our PMA team are working on, is around specific communities and how they supported those. So I can certainly ask them to pull something together, because I know they've been doing some fantastic work. We know, particularly for our community, deprivation is one of our biggest risk areas, because we know that women from deprived areas have a higher risk factor within pregnancy, but also that then goes on into early neonatal life and onwards in childhood. So there are a few areas that we're trying to target to look at, and it's just getting that funding. I know that we've brought forward before as well about the early implemented site work around smoking cessation. That's a key factor, particularly for our area. And I know Claire should love to come back soon and present something, because this is the first, this month will be the first month since, I want to say, 5 years that our SATOD, so our smoking at time of delivery rate, has gone below the national average, because we've been a national outlier, and this is the first month that we've gone below. So she's absolutely over the moon, because actually it's not just the cost impact, but actually the outcomes for these mums and babies, not just in pregnancy but future life, is absolutely fantastic. So I know her project's been extended, and obviously we support that as a maternity team, because the work that they do is phenomenal for our women. We've got the board story, we've made sure that's visible, because it's really important that our women hear from our local women, because it's relatable. They will, so it's about getting that communication out. So definitely we've got the smoking cessation work, but I can bring some of the other kind of targeted areas that we've looked at as well.
That's something you'd like us to take to one of the subcommittees. Back to
Yeah, maybe come back through quality, and obviously we've had Claire come and present to us before in her smoking cessation project and the brilliant work. So perhaps you could give the board's thanks to Claire and her team for the success of what she's been doing, and the impact that that's making on our local community. Andy.
Thanks, Paul. It's a really good report. Some really good stuff in here. I suppose two things. One, at the end, you comment on what I think is the score survey that's been delayed. I just wonder if you give us some idea about the timeline of when we can see some outputs from that. And the second, following the report that was published yesterday, with 1 in 5 women giving birth having mental wellbeing issues. I don't think I've seen a lot on that in our reporting, and I just wondered where we are, whether that's something that we might get an update on.
Perfect. Yeah. No. So obviously myself and David will be working very closely. So we know our teams have had a big change around, and even location change. So the resource wise, it is to deliver the score survey. It's the background work that we're struggling to get on top of. We had the delay initially because we were surveying both the staff survey and the pathway to excellence, and we wanted to separate it out and make it really clear to our maternity teams why this score survey is different. We also so once we've got all the background work done, we can start. We just need to formulate that timeline together. So myself and David will work closely on that. In relation to mental health, so we've got our perinatal mental health team that are working. So I would say they're over a year now that they've formed the Lotus team. So this is a team of an obstetrician, there's 2 midwives, but there's also external partners that work in the team, that they work together, and I'm more than happy to bring them in, perhaps we can either bring it through the paper, Phil, or the story, the work that they do. But Diane, who's one of our perinatal mental health midwives, was the DAISY recipient this time round, so she received that from one of her women. It's about that Lotus service and how they support the women through, and I think it came through the woman's voice really clear about how that service has supported them, and the reason why was she felt that nobody ever had the confidence in her to become a mum and be a supportive parent, and actually that's the reason why she nominated Diane, and it's because of that team. They work really closely with our women, because we know that, like you said, the mental health is on the increase within our women, so we need to support them. So I'm more than happy to bring that through as a feature within the paper as well.
We'll do a piece for Quality Committee, picking up some of these themes that board members have raised, and perhaps some of the hard to reach and high risk groups and some of that abilities agenda. We take that through Quality Committee.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Anything else, Phil? No? All good? Right. Thank you very much. And Paul, you're joining us. You're hanging around, aren't you?
I have to say yes.
Just checking. Yeah, you're on again in a little while. Right. We are on to strategic objective 3, maximise potential of our workforce. Back to you again, Phil.
Thank you. So this is the annual staffing paper that we require to bring to board. We bring it twice a year. Also, you'll probably note in the reading room every month we provide you with a safer staffing report. So this is an aggregated version of that. The reason it comes to board annually is to provide assurance on compliance with the NICE safer staffing guidance, the NQB standards, and the NHS developing workforce safeguards. And they're in Appendix 2 and 3, where it summarises and evidences once again our full compliance with those, which is a really good position to be in. We're very lucky we've got a lead nurse, Rebecca Herring, for safer staffing. who's part of the National Safer Staffing Faculty. She works for them a day a week, so she's part of developing the sort of safer staffing safeguards, how wallpaper should be pulled together, etc. So why she does a really good job and provides this framework for us to evidence our position and keeps us safe. Just pulling out some key bits from the paper, as you'll know, it is a huge paper. I think the really important things to point out here are we conducted multidisciplinary establishment review. We did this in conjunction with our finance, HR, our wards, departments and divisions, and that's just make sure our baseline staffing is correct. We did this using an acuity tool, the Safe Nursing Care tool, so it's an evidence-based tool that allows us to make sure we're monitoring activity and acuity and have we got the right levels of staff and the right speciality of staff, trained v untrained. So it's a really detailed, complex process, and you'll see a big chunk of the paper is some of the evidence of that. But it's a really robust process. And as I said, Rebecca's one of the people that leads and devises that, so it's certainly a big help for us. You'll know that there's an uplift in there of 61 whole-time equivalents. The majority of that is from the emergency department business case that came to board some months ago. So that equates for the majority of that uplift. Other uplifts are minor changes within wards and departments, mainly where there's been a change in speciality. As board aware, we've done a lot of moving around of wards, their functions and their specialities. So it just gives us a real safe baseline that we're comfortable we've got the right staff in the right places. All the key bits, and there are vacancy rates, so we'll be running at 5.4 to 4.7 for registered nursing. That's a really positive position if you think the national average is about 11%. What that doesn't include is our additional capacity areas we've got open, which, as you're aware, we're heavily reliant on bank and agency to maintain the staffing levels on there. Other key bits, I suppose you might see the number of incidents reported, 735 staffing related incidents. That sounds really high. That's a positive thing. It's about 70 a month, and we encourage our staff to report things like short notice sickness, use of high cost off framework agency, where patients have required additional support. So it's a positive reporting as well. Within that reporting, there's what we call red flags, which are the incidents and alerts that you need to pay attention to, and they're far smaller, and they're normally where there's been a delay in medication, perhaps a delay to an induction of labour. There's some key red flags that we focus on, but again, those levels are very low, as you'll note. International recruitment continues. We've just received an opportunity to bid for some more funding to support further international recruitment waves, which we're going to consider and bring a proposal through shortly. We've got a really robust international education support programme, which we've just submitted an accreditation for as well. That's how we care and look after our international educated colleagues and how we support and prepare our teams to receive and support them on arrival here. Something I'm really proud of, which I do want to bring to the board's attention, is we've just implemented framework for our internationally educated nurses, where we will assess their experience and expertise and make sure we point them on the appropriate pay scale, which is what we do for all our other nurses and registrants. What previously had been happening is colleagues came from abroad and they were put on the bottom of the pay scale. Something I feel really strongly about is inequitable. Working with Rob and his team, we've made sure we've got a consistent and equitable process. So regardless of where you're educated or what country you may have come from or where you're trained, you will undergo the same review and you'll be placed on the appropriate pay scale. So I think that's a really positive move for the organisation. In terms of midwifery, we mentioned the 3-year delivery plan. Again, we're waiting to understand what this means to our staffing, but I think it's worth noting our CQC review. They drew attention to the fact that our staffing levels were safe and that we had staff with the appropriate skill. So that was a really positive review. We've got 2 very successful internal MSc midwifery programmes in place, one with Birmingham and one with Derby, isn't it?
Derby. So
these are nurses within our organisation who are going on a top-up or conversion to be midwives. So that's going to give us a pipeline of 9 staff who will be fully qualified midwives who we've kept in the organisation. So that's really pleasing. And you've met them there when we've walked around. Fantastic group of staff. I'm going to bid for a further 5.
5 in January.
Yeah. And the last few points to bring the board's attention, there was an appropriate challenge I brought 6 months ago about raising the visibility of the AHP workforce. So we now have a quarterly slot on People and Culture Committee, which Rob and Manjeet will be aware of. Just gives us that visibility and opportunity to shape, support and challenge the direction of that workforce. But some key successes already. Some of the hard to recruit HP posts such as SLT and dietetics, we've made some good appointments to, which is really positive. And we're asking the team to focus on job planning and getting our HPs onto health roster so we can plan around the needs of the service and get some visibility and efficiency. And Kate, our Associate Chief HP, heavily involved in the ICS HP faculty, so starting to do some really joined up system working and looking at the roles across the system. So they've just appointed a lead HP as well, so really keen to be part of that and part of driving and leading that agenda. I could go on for ages, something I'm really passionate about and spend a majority of my time is in staffing, both making sure it's safe and the right levels and that our staff are well cared for and well looked after. But it's a really good paper that Rebecca's pulled together, and happy to take any questions or points, as is Paula from a maternity perspective.
Okay, Graham.
Just wanted to focus a little bit on urgent and emergency care division.
Yeah.
A little bit concerned on a few aspects of this. First of all, we did the business case a little while ago, which was about increasing the establishment in the area because of the extra workload going through there, and particularly the patients that are actually waiting for a bed and hanging on, etc., with an expectation that when that started to improve, they would be slipped out again and reallocated across the rest of the trust as necessary. This comes across as A, we haven't actually recruited any of those additional staff, and B, it reads to me as though we're almost hardwiring in the additional budget that was done, that which wasn't the intention of the business case. It was supposed to be a sliding one to cope with a period of time. And this comes across as we want this as fully established now. And that bothers me a bit, and perhaps this is a good case for one to look at as a post-implementation review, what's happened so far, what's gone right, what hasn't gone so right, and how we take it forward in the future. So it's just, I've got a little bit of concern the way this is written at the minute.
Yeah. Your last point was something when we brought the business case here, we were asked and we agreed to bring that back. So we've got that plan for the division in June.
Coming back to trust management team in June, I think was it going to come to finance committee after that? So that's in train. We discussed it with the division on their DPR last week, and the majority of posts are recruited too. They may not have all started yet, but there's some medical posts where they're waiting for trainees to qualify and so on. But the majority of nursing, I think, are recruited too. Your point about taking them back out again if the bed weight demand in there drops, absolutely right. I'm not quite sure where that's contradicted in the paper, but we haven't seen it yet. So we're not in a position to do that yet. But that absolutely will be the intent. If we can get to a sustained position of reduced medically safe and reduced bed weights in ED, then absolutely we'll look to put those staff and to redeploy them elsewhere. Phil, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, and a lot of that additional staffing has been previously undertaken with some of the high costs, particularly the Thornbury Off-Framework Agency. So periods of pressure, or we've got a long wait, the only option to staff that is to go for the high cost last minute agency. So some of this was again about trying to find an opportunity to bring in our own staff, which is better from a quality point of view, but also to reduce some of the spend, accepting that there's still a spend in there over and above what was budgeted. But we're absolutely committed to what you said. When that's not required, we'll pull out and redistribute, and with our vacancy position there would be no risk in doing that.
And that was the main reason it was signed off. It made sense and everything else. The way this, within the drafting, it felt as though it was being hardwired in as within the budget going forward and continuing. And I just want to make sure that that's not the case. And that comes back to the review.
Most of the staff we were appointed from a nursing perspective, we were appointed on rotational posts. So we rotate them on an emergency care pathway.
Yeah.
So we've already set that scene and standard that if you're not required in ED, you'll perhaps work in the emergency admissions unit or a short stay. So we've got a mobile workforce already.
I'll take Rich first, and then we'll stick on this finance piece, and then we'll come to Barbara.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Yeah, so it is a really good question, Graham. And it is transacting that business case into the processes, into the establishment to allow us to fully recruit and make sure it's there. But you're absolutely right that the review and the monitoring and the checks would enable us to redeploy as Rachel described if the operational conditions allow. I just wanted to come in a little bit on what Phil's just been talking about, just to give some context on the financial arrangements around this. So Phil described the process. It's a really good process. It's evidence-based. It's multidisciplinary, as has been described. Our nursing pay is about £10 million a month in total, and about 25% of that in the previous financial year is either through bank or agency. On average, a bank, the cost of bank nursing is about 30% more than substantive. Agencies more than double on average. So there's a whole lot of expenditure to go out there, almost 25%. So getting our establishments right, making sure that we're investing in our substantive workforce, making sure that we've got our wards fully covered, really does help us to make some of those inroads as well. So it's a relatively modest investment that should be more than offset by savings elsewhere and our ambition to reduce agency.
The establishment review process, which we'll be doing biannually, allows us to change and adjust any establishment. That's the beauty of the process. So if we've evidence in there where we've taken some wards and areas down because the tool shows that that's no longer required at that level. So we'll do the same with the emergency care process.
Do you want to come in on this issue?
No, my question.
Okay, I thought that's a big
Yeah.
point. Okay, Barbara?
So just to say that a very comprehensive report, if not quite long, and lots to be celebrated. So you've already acknowledged about reduced agency costs and so on coming down. What I liked about this report was the first time I've seen that I can recall section in the AHP about staff competencies, developing and new roles. And I think what really we're seeking assurance about, aren't we, through this process, is that we've got competent staff in the right place at the right time that meets patients' needs. And we end up sort of defaulting, don't we, in traditional language like nurses or midwives or physios, but actually we've got competent people doing the job. And so it was great to see, those new roles. And the bit that the paper was light on for me was really around this sort of place of apprenticeships. It was touched on in places, but how we might be using apprenticeships for areas where, we're struggling to recruit, or new roles are being developed, and just what your reflections are on the role of apprenticeships.
Probably the only one we've done really successfully within my teams is the nurse associate role. We've got 4 cohorts of nurse associates who come in on the apprenticeship route, and the first cohort are now just converting to be registrants. So they've gone through that whole sort of 5-6 year journey. We're going to showcase some of those as a way of sort of our homegrown staff publicising and telling their story. There is a way to become a registered nurse or to become a nurse associate. So that's one of the things I've done quite successfully. It's quite time consuming and quite an expensive model to run, which has limited our numbers, and also the ability to support these cohorts. That's something we will continue to do. The HP team are doing similar things, looking at some of the apprenticeship routes. So I still think we're quite in our infancy and not as advanced as some of our bigger peers who are perhaps attached to universities and got other resource and opportunity, but we're certainly around the table and certain piloting it, and we're working with NTU, as you know, and Derby Uni to try and see what's out there. I think in terms of new roles, again, the HP role, the ACP role, we were at the forefront of developing that with NUH in the emergency care setting, and we've got a really robust 40+ in ED. But again, we never quite managed to replicate and roll that out across the wider organisation, but we have now got 2 in critical care with another 2 being recruited to, and we just recruited 2 into our neonatal team, which is really hard to recruit, and getting those in, you start to get that critical mass, you then get the infrastructure and you can recruit more. So there's lots more to go at, but I think we've prioritised the roles and areas that would give us the most benefit for our workforce gaps. So the ED and the ACPs in there was pivotal in supporting critical care and neonatal, other high risk areas, but that's where we've targeted. Working with the ICS faculty, looking at what we can be part of as a system, because that's the best way to address some of these problems, is to have a system approach to some of the apprenticeship. discuss any pooling your resources and your.
Sure. The one that sprang to mind, if I'm honest, was we had a presentation a couple of board meetings ago from speech and language and nutrition, and both the SALT team and the dietetics mentioned that they would aspire to having apprenticeship. So it's good to hear that it's, you know, an area developing. And about the ACP, advanced care practitioners. I'm trying to avoid acronyms and I find myself slipping into them. Is there anything that we as the board can do to help with that? Because, you know, recruitment and retention, people will be interested in job opportunities that give them changed horizon in terms of their career. You know, are there things that we as a board can do to help with that?
One of the things that we're starting to do is people aren't aware of the pathways and how you progress. Some of the work we started doing in Vision West and to use some of that to our community. People don't realise at 16 what jobs are available to me. So rather than, you know, in the hospital we've got all sorts of trades, not just nurses and doctors. So there's something about how we make that visible, how we make it accessible, and just talking to people at those events. They didn't realise that that was a route they could do because they haven't got the right qualifications, or how can I afford to do that? So the big bit we need to get better at is making it accessible and easy for people to understand, and then support people to actually, when they know what they want to, how do we then help them do it? It's actually good at the beginning and good at the end, but it's like, how do we, as an organisation, I suppose, drive that? I don't know, David, if you've got any comments from.
Yeah, well, yeah, just to add to that, I agree, and Rob will remind us of the date. There's an ideal opportunity for board to come along to so we've done two through Rob's team and the comms support, 2 events at West Notts College venue. The third session that we're doing, I think, is the 15th of June.
20th of June.
20th of June.
Tuesday evening, it'll be hosted on site here, and I would encourage all board members to find the time to come along, because it's around stepping into the NHS, but we're having a particular focus on clinical roles. We also want to use it as a platform for our own people to learn a little bit more around opportunities in the place that they work, hence it hosting here. And I think what you're describing, Barbara, is a real opportunity for us to do some, you know, some positive showcasing around roles, opportunities, apprenticeships, a really kind of collaborative approach, not just highlighting one profession, but all the multi-professions we have across our 3 sites.
And whereas the difference is the first 2 events have been predominantly focused on the public and students and hoping to raise aspirations and insights for young people locally. This event is about the people that work for us on this. So again, having board members there and championing that and helping create that buzz and energy would be really welcome.
It's about understanding our local population, as you often say, Barbara, and if the courses at Vision West for 16-year-olds aren't the right ones to access the next stage, we've got it wrong straight away.
Thank you. Right, I've got a number of other. Manjeet wanted to come in, Steve, Andy.
Yes, I wanted to say first of all, it's really positive to see all the particular areas of improvement, and particularly dietetics, considering how fragile we were discussing that last year. That was really positive to hear. And what I wanted to ask was, there's various levers we're using, and you know, we've just been talking about the local community and apprenticeships. We're talking about international nurses and so on. So what I wanted to ask was, what other levers are we potentially looking at that we could explore, that, you know, in terms of the vacancy rate? And secondly, what I wanted to ask about was, how are we predicting some of the areas which may become fragile as part of our workforce planning, and looking at what we can do further upstream? And then, so that's one question. The second question is entirely different. It's about retention. I've had these discussions with Rob as well. And one of the things we'd like more assurance, and maybe this can come to people committee, but some detailed assurance is the whole when people leave, you know, the consistency of what's called at the moment exit interviews, but I know you're looking at leaving conversations or whatever, but the consistency of how that's carried out, how information's captured and how it informs learning. That's an area that applies across the board, but particularly I just welcome your ideas. See more on
try and remember about 5 questions there, man, so bear with me. And yeah, probably something worth discussing more detail at people and culture committee. But
Yeah.
in terms of prediction and looking at levers, there's things like the age profile. I'll take nurses as an example. And feel free to comment, but we've got about 35% who can retire if they choose to. So that's something we can predict. And what we do very well here is we get people that retire and return. I think it's really important to remember that's temporary. So at best, you've got 5 years to recognise that they're going to go if you didn't recognise it the first time we went. I don't think we're great at predicting that. There's some national shortages in these some of these professions, as you know. So some of the, again, nursing's a good example. There's been a huge piece of work over the last sort of 6 years to increase numbers, but it takes time for those to fall through and come out the other end. So there are some particular groups of staff, nurses, dietetics, so they're just really hard to recruit to. And then there's things about us as an organisation, we can do things to make ourselves attractive and to be a good employer. Equally, there's some services and things we don't offer and never will offer. So some people sometimes have to go elsewhere to get that experience, or we have to get better at doing a rotational post as a system. Again, we'll talk about that, but in reality, it's I've seen the challenge with Medics Day. It's really hard to get people buy into the theory, but then all of us, become instant to protect your own service and your own staffing levels. So neonatal nurses are a good example, aren't they? Where we don't have a high level, critical care and to maintain the experience, the competencies, the skills. So they have to go and do that elsewhere. What we should do is work with Nottingham, which we're trying to do a rotation and move some of the senior staff around. So I think there's something about some stuff is out of our control or harder to control about what you offer and what the core services are we deliver, and that's very similar for salt and dietetics.
And there's something to be sort of just aware of, that as we recruit, we're usually recruiting from somewhere else. So if we take our neonatal unit at the moment, we are aware that we have been successful, but another local neonatal unit has lost a number of their staff. And in the round, we will feel an impact of that. So whilst we can bask in that and say, have we done well, it's the overall pool that's the difficult aspect. And again, that goes along with some of the more blended roles that actually people move around, and because they're few and far between, our partners feel that if we're successful.
I think to also complement what Phil's described, we are in the next stage of refreshing our strategic workforce plan. So something we introduced to board last year. And as we come to the end of the first year, we reset it again, which is then a 5-year look forward in regards to those points of fragility that you've touched on, Manjeet. We want that to be an evolving document for us to be able to prioritise focus. You also touched on exit conversations. I'll cast your mind back to a conversation we had through the People Committee a few months ago around the itchy feet concept that we're planning to introduce as part of year 2 of the People Strategy. And that would be a key component of having conversations when they're thinking about maybe wanting some variety or some change before they even attempt to apply for another role. And key component, as Phil touched on, is rotation. I think the difficulty is being able to have a real sense of belonging here at Sherwood, and sometimes as much as we might want to describe collaboration with our partners, which we're keen to do, we want to stay here. So we're sometimes trying to create some additional rotations across the site, and we've had some real successes in UEC. I think it's fair to say, Phil, haven't we? We're considering how we can do that further across all the specialities across the organisation.
That fits in with the retention bit, Manjeet. We do an internal transfer process, so somebody wants to work in a different speciality. For me, we should be able to support and accommodate that without putting in a process that makes them apply for jobs or look elsewhere. So I'd like to think we can do pretty much most stuff internal. A lot of retention, you mentioned.
Yeah, so within maternity, we've got a specific midwife that focuses on recruitment and retention. So this midwife, we know, we're looking at our age profiling, so we've got a significant proportion of midwives, so 40% that can retire. And then with the rest of very early career. So it's about supporting that early career. That was our initial focus, and she's done that so successfully. Now we've got a really clear preceptorship programme. He has that ongoing pastoral support from her. and that rotation through the area, so they get that experience exposure, and we can say our community service has been a success of that, because historically community was hard to recruit into, but having that supportive package through there, we're fully established in our community, so we can see the benefits of having that supportive role. The next phase of it is legacy mentors, so we're looking at particularly our retired returned midwives. So we know that we've just been out to survey them, that they want to work reduced hours, so they're starting to work shorter shifts, so not the 12-hour shifts, so they're working shorter shifts, but looking at what a couple of them becoming legacy mentors, so they can then on clinically shift support our early career midwives and support them through. So we know that one person can't do this alone, but this legacy mentoring helps to support them, and it is nationally recognised in maternity that that's the shift forward that we need to look at. So we've applied for some additional funding for that, and we will be doing that, because I think it's really important. I don't want to lose this experienced cohort of midwives. If it means we make these adjustments and that's what they want to do, then I'm absolutely happy to do that, because we knew this was coming. Nationally, this was a paper that came out over 10 years ago that said this was coming, and it's about us being prepared for that. So yeah, we've got a lot of, and it's now trying to reflect that out into wider teams, like Phil said. I know we use it a lot around our neonatal clinic, particularly around that legacy mentoring, and then the NMP roles, etc. So it's just reflecting that learning out and sharing it with our colleagues in the senior nursing team as well. So it's something we've spoken about before, and I know Sharon's active both within the trust but regionally as well, and celebrating success, and she's been presenting at lots of conferences of the work that we've been doing. So it's been fantastic to see it recognised.
Okay, I've got a few more points to pick up from non-exec. So, Steve.
Thank you. Comment on a quick question, please. Thank you. Yeah, for the board's assurance at the last people committee, we had a very good conversation again about allied health professionals, and we agreed to put on the work plan not just a regular repeat of that, so that we can continue to receive assurance, hopefully, about progress. But also we talked about other professions, for example, pharmacy, where we know we're struggling with vacancies and recruitment, and also perhaps looking at some services. So I think you use the phrase slicing and dicing in terms of different ways of looking at areas we may be a bit fragile, so that we can continue to receive assurance or look for assurance. The question that I had was building on a theme from colleagues. So the work we're doing with West Notts College looks like a real role model, and we've talked about alternative routes to for staff to train. But from a core point of view, so for example, nurses who still want to come through the degree route, do we know if in the rest of the system we're having similar success, either with local institutions or with NHSE, in terms of keeping a very healthy pipeline coming through for Nottingham? Not sure who I'm addressing that question to.
I mean, the pipeline on a whole is not as full as it needs to be. The data point's really valid. We're all fishing from the same pool.
Yes.
So we do really well at the moment. It's a good organisation to work, and people want to be here. So while we focus on that, we poaching staff from elsewhere. So the pipeline isn't big as it needs to be. There's a huge national driver to increase that pipeline. As I say, it's going through in another 3-4 years. We should see some dividends of that, but that's if you keep all your other staff employed, retained, etc., and they don't leave at the other end. International recruitment has just been confirmed again as an absolute must continue. The only way we will continue to meet the gap is to continue with international recruitment. There's a lot of debates about that. Is it ethical? Are we again taking nurses from other countries that may have a deficit? But certainly the driver nationally to continue with international recruitment to supplement that, and the nurse associate route to continue to drive that through the apprenticeship route and encourage those to go on to do their full nurse top up. Again, that's a 5-7 year program. So a lot of this we're looking at.
Absolutely, yes.
5-6 years time. But if we don't retain and stop the sieve at the other end, it stays the same at best.
I don't know if you wanted Rob or I to update on your question about the pharmacy.
I think my only comment on that, Steve, we've made sure it's an agenda item on the next people committee, so we can have some focused time discussing that. And what I'd be proposing to both yourself and Manjeet is that then becomes part of the future work cycle of the committee. So we've got a more in-depth opportunity to review all of our occupations through that in some greater depth.
And we've met with our pharmacy team to start that forward progress. So
Great. Thank you. I think the answer to, thank you for that, would be the question about whether other academic institutions in Nottinghamshire are being engaged in a similar way. Do we know that? And if not, is there anything we can do to encourage that?
We work very closely with Nurse Midwifery, Nottingham, Derby, Lincoln, Sheffield. We engage a lot with NTU, but we do a lot less with NTU because that's a newer relationship.
Yeah.
So most of our pipeline doesn't come from NTU, it comes from Lincoln, Derby, Nottingham. So that's where most of our students are from, and that's where most of our staff are employed from. We're just trying to build the same relationships with NTU because of the links towards us as a local organisation, but certainly doesn't produce the output at that level yet.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
We also recently had a meeting with Lincoln College, which has within its portfolio Newark College, with the prospect of having something similar in the Newark area around the recruitment and opportunities to what we've been doing as a trust with West Notts College. So yes, there's a sort of an expansion on that as well.
A great success with Lincoln in terms of the volume of
the nursing staff that comes through, yes.
And a lot of them are local to the area who travel to Lincoln, so it's very successful.
Andy, and then I've got something to pick up as well.
So I think it was Clinical Nurse Specialist Day last week. We know that they can be invaluable for service delivery for a number of services. I don't see that in this report, Phil. I know we did a review of that a few years back. Where are we with that? Are we healthy, or is it an area that we need to do more work on?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Definitely an area we need to do more work on. We've got a lot of nurse specialists, but part of the discussion we're having is you can be a nurse working in a specialism, doesn't make you a nurse specialist. We're trying to unpick the competencies and experience of the staff in those roles. There's a lot to do, and a lot of them are in key services like respiratory, and doing some really key work. The cancer team are probably a team that we have got really defined competencies and visibility on, but certainly one of our key pieces we're going to look at in the next year is how many have we got. We're doing some stuff already like job planning, so we get visibility on how they're spending their time, best use of their time. I think that's the first step. Who have we got, what are they doing, what are the roles, then we start understanding the competence and the capability. Who are nurse specialists and who are nurses working in a specialist, and two totally different things. And then it's how best we use them within the services. So I think there's a lot of work to do on that, but you're right, they provide an awful lot of valuable care, admission avoidance, nurse-led clinics, lots of that to do. Again, some of that keen to look at system-wide. You take diabetes specialists, for example, we've got some here, we've got some in GPs, we've got some in. There should be a way where we pull diabetes care as a pathway and stop bringing fit healthy people, which a lot of them are, into a hospital, things that could be done via an app or at school or wherever else. So in answer to your question, there's a lot to do. We can probably, what we will do is something in next time. I think it's got a bit of visibility on what we're starting to do.
I suspect the changing models that we need to be sustainable, they're going to have a key role. So knowing what we've got, what we need, and how we keep them when we get them is going to be important. So some visibility through people committee, I think, would be helpful.
Obviously, with the ACP, where it's a really clear defined framework, we're just about to launch the CNS framework, which will give us some helpful guidance then.
I just wanted to pick up on the ask for additional workforce in the phlebotomy services. As we're aware, blood clinic has been getting increasingly busy, and you obviously refer to that in the paper, and that's come back through what we've seen as we've done walkarounds, and I know the governors in one of their recent meetings, governors also fed that back to me as well. What it also suggests is that quite a bit of that increase has come as a result of primary care pressures and perhaps referrals from primary care for blood tests to take place here as a result of the challenges that many of the GP surgeries are having in fulfilling blood tests. So given that we are being asked to increase the workforce there and the investment into that. What discussions are being held on a wider basis with primary care to look at where that pressure has come from and to how we risk share on some of those things and what the plan is for the provision of phlebotomy services in wider.
So probably not had the wider conversations that you referenced there. I think what we've done, a bit that's evidence today, is we've been doing a lot of extra bank additional hours to meet that demand that you just described. So what we've done is substantiated some of that. So again, like the nursing, we do it at a cheaper rate with our own staff to provide that service. I think your point's key about us taking all the risk, aren't we, and all the. So that's something we need to take away as an action. But David, Rich,
yeah, well, so I think our walk-in phlebotomy service is an excellent service.
It is.
It gets very busy. It gets very busy for a reason. I think our colleagues in primary care really appreciate the fact that we've got pretty much an open door. People can walk into KTC.
Speak up a little bit because I know that.
People can walk into KTC and have that facility. I think over a number of years, we're conscious that primary care has not invested in practice-based phlebotomy, perhaps in a way that has kept up with demand. And so that is coming to us in some shape or form. We're seeing that. I don't think we realistically had significant discussions with the system about where that risk sits and how we're funding that. So I think that may be something to take outside of this meeting and to explore.
I mean, I think we are. I agree with you. Our phlebotomy services are excellent. The access that people have to them, they are becoming, they get that demand because of that service, and people know that they can turn up here and get the blood tests that they need at the time that they need them. But it may be that we need to have a specific conversation with our primary care partners, because otherwise we will continue to fund and provide those services at a rate where effectively people won't be able to get them into their communities. And we need to be thinking not just about the provision of those phlebotomy services here, but how we provide them clearly in Newark. And then I'm guessing that in the longer term, within the next year, 18 months, we will be providing some of those services at the new Mid-Nottinghamshire CDC, the Community Diagnostic Centre. So
some of this will be inpatient as well, just to mention.
And will be inpatient.
Our bed base and but valid. Absolutely.
Yeah, I having recently wandered around it on a few occasions, I can see that the demand that was there was definitely not inpatients. David and then Rich.
Yeah, thank you. So I agree with Dave and Phil. I think the conversation with primary care is one worth taking forward, and Dave and I will pick that up with the links that we've got with Till and Bartholomew and colleagues in primary care. And just to say, the Community Diagnostic Centre will start in October with some phlebotomy early activity this year. So there will be some enhanced service provision from the Mansfield Community Hospital site. What's really clear from the evidence that we're hearing from patients is people are willing to travel for blood tests, which is interesting. So we are, I think.
Could I just say, is it willing or they find it necessary? And I think that's a different issue.
The patient feedback we get is people, if they need a blood test, they want their blood test, and therefore they are willing to travel wherever that blood test is available. Whether they prefer it on their doorstep, I think you're absolutely right.
Okay, Rich.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. So a really good point around demand for services and risk sharing and resource sharing around that. So I think this is one of the things that's changed over the past few years in the way financial frameworks have worked. We've tended to cost up what our services are expected to cost, and then look to seek to kind of split an allocation based on that. One of the things that was stood down through COVID was our contract delivery groups and our activity and performance groups. which were the kind of routine meetings that we'd have with commissioners on a monthly basis. That's the kind of forum where you can look at activity trends, look at demand trends, look at what's changing and see to get some support across the system around that. They're being re-established in the next couple of weeks. So through those sort of forums, that will give us an opportunity to hopefully improve on that again and bring that rigour back in.
Okay, that's good. Rachel?
Yeah, 2 points really. It's not a conversation I've been involved in since I've been here, but I absolutely was in Nottingham for exactly the same reasons. And I think it's partly the demand shifts that we're describing, but also I think there's a legacy impact from COVID here, that when GP practices were discouraging people from coming on site, actually a lot of that activity drifted towards the hospital that was open, you know, to everything. I think that the point I wanted to make actually was a little bit more about the potential opportunity here if we can get this right, because one of the impacts that we saw during the junior doctor strike, where one of the mitigating actions we took was because we'd taken loads of clinics down, we were able to release all those phlebotomists to go out onto the wards. We saw hard to absolutely measure, but we did see an impact on flow of having, you know, twice daily rounds on the wards of phlebotomy. So actually, if we could do something to control the demand from a walk-in and outpatient perspective, we have an opportunity to redeploy that resource into improving our flow and dealing with some of our challenges on the wards in terms of the bed pressures that we've discussed.
Thank you. I think that's been a really good discussion and hopefully has provided some additional assurance to non-executives of the thinking and processes behind the workforce plan. Thank you very much. Can I move on now to medical?
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm approaching this with a little bit of trepidation now after that. and certainly it's the last time I'm sitting next to you because I'm exhausted for you. And whilst I sort of plot and plan to do a supportive, aggressive raid on corporate nursing and attract Bex Herring, I just note that this is the 6th monthly medical workforce staffing update that's come to board. I think it's only the 2nd time we've brought this, so this is work in progress, work in development. It's a bit shorter than the report we've just been discussing, but nonetheless I think it does have a number of important points, and it has a slightly different focus, but a number of successes that we can highlight and discuss. It's broken down into various sections. The first section is around the statutory requirements and details information around appraisal and revalidation. Our appraisal rate is somewhere between 88 and 90%, and I can confidently say that's a market leader within our local area. And at the same time, I'd also draw board's attention to the clinical fellow and the senior clinical fellow ARCP, the assessment process, which is akin to that we put our trainees through. And Sherwood is, if this is an initiative by Sherwood, and it helps us quality assure this against the workforce, and it's seen as a real positive approach. So much so, we've just been talking this week with the regional team. Ali might be aware of this if he was here, and we've been asked to present this to the regional medical directors as an example of what we should be doing with our workforce. Going back to some of the data, again, I'm sure you'll have noticed the actual number of linked doctors to me as the responsible officer is increasing in a fairly steady way, and is clear to see. And now we've got over 450 linked doctors, and you can see that does have an impact across not just the medical director's office, but also almost certainly across other aspects like our medical HR workforce. That's again a real success, I think, and that's our desire and ambition to have more permanent workforce, and it picks up some of the points that Phil was mentioning about temporary workforce locums and moving away from that. I don't think I'll dwell much on the revalidation aspects. I'll just remind board that this is a statutory requirement. It's overseen by the General Medical Council, in which the trust reviews the last 5 years appraisals of a doctor and then makes a recommendation to the GMC, which undergoes a quality assurance process. Also included in this section, there's some update on the 2023 job planning. And it's a bit difficult if you print this off to see it in the different greys, but we've made really substantial progress in this, particularly when we focus in a number of the other distractions that have been occurring in the organisation over the last, this year to date. I think we're in a better place with our 2023 job planning than we have been for a number of years, and that's a credit to the teams involved in that. I've put some detail around the impact of the junior doctors strike, and the board will be aware that talks happened on Tuesday. I have no update on that, but you'll see in the narrative the date for the consultants BMA ballot, which is described there. I think on a more positive note, I just highlight the significant progress that we've made about the with board support with the re-provision refresh of the doctor's mess, and I'd like to thank the board for their help with this. That task and finish group is established, it's met, the project brief is close to being locked. We've done a series of walk rounds, and we're just awaiting the feasibility study on that, and I hope that can proceed at pace. Of course, by re-providing the doctor's mess there, it creates a series of domino moves. There's the re-provision of the wellbeing spaces for all other members of our staff or colleagues. There is the reallocation of the old doctor's mess to our medical students, and then there's a release of that space back into the pool. There's also an update in the paper about the role and the appointment to our chief registrar. And this is the first time that we've appointed a chief registrar who's a non-RCP, Royal College of Physicians affiliated member. So the chief registrar programme is a initiative from the Royal College of Physicians, but it's a really strong step that this is someone out with that, albeit they have the same support in their role. And again, there's work to do, I think, about developing a pool of chief registrars. I don't think we need one per division, but we certainly need more than one. And there's interest in that, but that comes with an impact because they're 50% leadership roles. And then there's a small update around the Guardian of Safe Working progress. But I'll just draw the board's attention to the two sustainability fellows that Helena Clements has managed to bid for and achieve and appoint to. One's an anaesthetic trainee, and then one's one of our ACP, AHPs, and those should be really positive for the organisation. And then the next part of the document details some of the work undergoing around the new bank rates. We haven't reviewed our bank rates for a number of years. We've taken that through various committees, and we're due to do the launch for comms, and then we got rather derailed by the industrial action and the rapid implementation of escalated rates, or the BMA rate card. So we were discussing this earlier this week with our divisional teams, and recognising the significant risk associated with this, we've agreed to pause this work for another 6 weeks or so, while we hopefully allow that industrial action process to flow through, along with some of the national discussions around rate cards. And then the final part of the papers is around the medical workforce, the data of the demographics. You can see there Phil was talking about the retirees. You can see that the risk associated with the ageing workforce. And then there's some information around the vacancies and the newer ways of working, and updates around the task and finish groups related to our challenged or fragile services. And we've seen some success with that, and much of that has been discussed in the number of the board's committees. And then the final bit is just an update around the increase in training posts and clinical fellow recruitment that we've managed to achieve. So I hope the board finds that useful information. I look forward to questions.
Might have already, Phil might have already taken most of it. You're exhausted by it.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have a few though. We'll start with Barbara.
Thanks, Dave. So it's not going to be too much for Gloria. It's more just seeking assurance that I noticed in the paper you'd commented that anaesthetics was an area where there were a number of vacancies, and I noticed in the AHP paper that there was issues about recruitment and retention within the theatres realm and ODPs and ODAs. So obviously all of that comes together slightly, and I just assurance is that when Rob mentioned earlier, and I can't remember how you described it, splicing and spike or whatever the term was, that you would look at it in its totality, not just through the lens of medics or nurses, but to look at critical areas and sort of.
I think you make a really valid point there, Barbara, because you can look at things in isolation and on face value it may seem that things are satisfactory, but actually when you combine it with lenses of different occupations, you've then got challenge. And that's the more mature work that we're trying to get conversation through the people committee to have.
Right.
Recognising when we look at our workforce, we need to look at it in the rounds and then have appropriate interventions through whether it's task and finish groups or more of a wider kind of fragile services conversation around how are we going to use alternative roles, support professions to make that more an inclusive place to work. I'll also draw back to conversations we had last time around the heat map conversation that we're starting to pursue, and I look forward to having a more in-depth conversation with you and Manjeet ahead of that, going through whether people committee or quality committee about what that intelligence is telling us.
Yeah, I suppose it's the assurance about those conversations happening, because we need to see the competent workforce in its totality rather than through just single disciplines, really.
And there's a couple of points to make. One is around, we held an open day that Rob was highlighting yesterday, where we for theatre staffing, we had some really good success with appointing ODPs. I think we appointed a number,
5 or 6 people
on the day.
Yeah.
And so these more modern, better recruitment fairs, whatever we want to call them. You've heard some examples of that today, but these really pay off for us, and it's worth investing a bit of time and effort in those. So that's really positive. I think anaesthetics is one of those specialties. It's not the only one, but it's certainly one of those specialties that has been let down by some of the national recruitment processes very significantly, and the workforce planning. And I happen to know that the ST4, so the sort of getting onto the senior training programs, the recruitment, so there's a vast number of anaesthetic trainees who've been unable to progress at that bottleneck, despite an enormous need for more anaesthetists. And it seems an absolute nonsense that artificial bottleneck is in place. Now, that's how, with our ability to influence, apart from using the national forums, but it is a frustration when everyone knows that anaesthetic workforce, and you go to any organisation, I suspect it's the same in Leicester, you go to any organisation, they will say we're short of anaesthetists, we can't clear our backlogs, and that's a key to the financial stability in terms of our elective recovery. So that's a real tricky conundrum. Now, there is work going, and I do know that this is at the level of the Secretary of State and the health ministers, but
do we have I won't pursue us too much, or maybe a conversation over coffee, because presumably the clinical fellow role, people don't want to lose their national training number, really. They want to stay on that training programme because that's much preferential, really, but presumably
it's a clearer route to consultants.
But given we're giving ARCPs and we've got fellowship routes, we have a bit more of a flexible offer, don't we?
Yeah, and we've had some success in recruiting specialists. So there's this new specialist role, and again, this is something that will help us to do that. But also I happen to know that the demand on the various national professional bodies for equivalence to gain accreditation by the non-conventional training route, so the what's called the CSER program, certificate of recognition of training. They are swamped now, and it's not just in anaesthetics, so that's a problem.
Yeah. Yes, Andrew.
I'm just looking at the appraisals and revalidation graphs, and they all seem to be going in the wrong way in terms of, overdue and due and signed off. Just wonder if there's a business risk or a patient to this at all, and how we could overcome it. Simple terms.
So what happens with the appraisal? So the appraisal compliance is very good at the moment, and it comes in cycles. So the appraisals is an annual process. So you'll see some dip, and that relates to the impact that people have not had their appraisals because of the industrial action. We'll pick that up as the activity. We can utilise our workforce to do this other activity. So I don't see it as a risk. No, I think this will be something we'll pick up.
Right.
Excellent.
There we are. We'll finish that conversation swiftly then, shall we?
Thanks, Phil.
Great, thank you. So we'll move on to strategic priority 5, achieving better value. The improvement faculty. David, tell us all about it.
Thank you very much. So with great anticipation, I present to you in your pack today a set of slides that set out the improvement faculty launch, which I'm delighted to say is today. We have a physical facility that we would like to invite you all to at 2:30 for a piece of cake and some ribbon cutting, and to have a look at what we've set up with. Particular thanks to Rob, the estates team and the porters for some office moves for that to happen. So thank you to everybody in the background that allowed that to occur. And a formal welcome to library services who are joining the team as well from today. The team of improvement, transformation, PMO teams coming together in a physical hub. And, I recognise that the improvement faculty itself is going to be on a journey of its own as well, as you bring naturally different teams who haven't necessarily worked together into a common purpose vehicle, then clearly that's going to have some development of its own as well. So very mindful of that. In landing the improvement faculty, I was really clear that it needed a home for governance, a home for reporting, a home for assurance and oversight. And I'm really pleased to say that we've agreed that that will be through the people subcommittee of the board. And Manjeet might want to, when I finish talking, come in and say a few things around that. And we've certainly had a meeting this week around setting the agenda and the expectations of the improvement faculty and the reporting through that subcommittee, and I think that provides board hopefully with some top-down direction and assurance visibility of the improvement faculty and its activities. Clearly central to the success of any improvement is going to be a bottom-up though as well, isn't it? And I mentioned earlier about hearts and minds. There will be a real key job for the improvement faculty to engage people, the organisation of all levels, to create opportunities for colleagues to rotate in and out of the improvement faculty, and that's already happened. We've had, as a result of some of the communication launch this week, 2 people have written into the faculty already and said they're interested, they'd like to come and learn some new skills. So we'll look at what opportunities that might create. And, it signifies a move away from the transaction, I think, that we've perhaps undertaken towards some of these activities of late. I trained personally in some of the improvement tools and techniques like lean, statistical process control, PDSA, plan, do, study at. I trained in those about 20 years ago, and I recognise that the tools themselves haven't actually fundamentally changed. The improvement science over that last 20 years hasn't really improved itself, or the tools haven't changed. But what's important is our approach needs to. So it's really important to me that whilst we may well still be using the same science and tools, we absolutely need to ensure that goes hand in glove with engagement. And things like building communities or champions or train the trainers, you know, and all those kind of things. You can see in the paper there are 4 pillars. So in the interest of time, I'll just briefly say pillar 1 about improving capability, capacity and engagement in the organisation in the way that I've just discussed. And that will include things like the development of online resources so that there's a self-help part to this as well. It's not about doing things to and for people all the time, is it? Sometimes it's about signposting people to that self-help resource as well. Pillar 2 is about evaluating new ideas and providing solutions, and we intend to undertake that in a multi-professional approach. So this won't be, you know, building on the conversation we've just had, it won't be nurse silo or doctor silo, it will be across the multi-professions. Pillar 3 is all about the programme delivery, and programme 4 is about monitoring and evaluation and assurance. So one of the things I'm really keen to do, picking up Graham's earlier point, is to make sure as an organisation we have a way of looking back, learning. So let's stop, reflect, learn, celebrate what was good, learn from what didn't go so well, and you know, and celebrate the hard work of people that, you know, have put their effort into this. And my final point, before maybe Manjeet wants to say something, is on slide 12 of the pack, it clearly sets out for you the agreed initial work programme for the improvement faculty. So optimising patient journey, we've got an SRO for that now. That will be obviously all around demand management and predominantly urgent care and flow through the hospital. The planned care transformation around theatres and elective recovery, which again, individual SROs may want to say more on, and workforce transformation, which I think we've been talking enough about so far, so I won't go into the detail of any of that. I'd expect those to go through the subcommittee and the assurance and reporting of what those programmes look like, what their objectives are and what their KPIs should and will be over time. So I'll pause at that point and just remind everybody at 2:30 we'd be delighted for you to join us just across the corridor for some cake and non-alcoholic fizz. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Manjeet.
Yes, I was going to say, firstly, thank you. It's really positive to see that, you know, your analysis of what you need to do with moving forward the improvement faculty and the 4 pillars summarise, you know, the new approach. So it's really positive to see that. And we have, you know, earlier this week, Robin, Dave and I have been talking about how we carve out more time in the people, culture and improvement agenda for the improvement item. And we have a 3-hour committee, which is pretty full already with all the wonderful things that Rob's colleagues and everybody do. But it's now, you know, the challenge is how we provide oversight there. But again, and it's not just oversight, it's the championing as well. But again, you know, this is something which is important strategically, and it is at the board level that we've been having the discussions, as well as the finance committee and other committees. So I think everybody's got a role to play in the governance oversight as well as the championing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Davey. Clear that we identified some long time ago we need a change in approach to improvement. Thanks to David for taking on the leadership, and today we'll see the opening of what we might call the physical entity of improvement faculty. Of course, what is really important is that we win the hearts and minds of everyone in the organisation, create a movement for improvement, and that everyone sees it as part of their role, and clearly that'll be part of the work of the faculty. But thanks, David, for bringing it. And the priorities that you've outlined on slide 12 align with our strategic priorities that we signed off at the last board, and will continue to be a focus within the strategic plan that we put together. And also thank you for the description and how the faculty will facilitate the sort of bottom-up approach as well. So there's a top-down prioritisation priorities, but the bottom-up approach of facilitating those ideas that come from all our colleagues. Yeah, looking forward to this afternoon and working with the faculty and seeing how it develops. So thank you.
Barbara.
Right, thanks, very helpful. Just to bring some of those transformation programmes that are referenced in the final page of the document to life, really, maybe in the reading room for some of us who don't go to the people committee, to understand exactly what does that mean, what does good look like, what are the impacts that we're expecting to see delivered, and sort of timelines, and sort of bringing it to life, really, because some of them will link to policy agenda. So, you know, just making transparent.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, great to see it really taking shape, and looking forward to the non-alcoholic fizz this afternoon. David, could you elaborate a little bit on the on how some of this might work? So in terms of the principle, get the quality right and financial improvement will follow. I think I know where that's coming from. When we come to the strategic priorities that Paul has referenced, for example, there's one specifically there on productivity. And I'd like to think that it's not going to be sort of haphazard, that the benefits we're evaluating financially will just be what they are, rather than it's something we're targeting to achieve. In some cases, lots of things they may not be relevant, but where specifically we're looking for productivity, or we would expect a financial benefit. What's the? It's not that those things don't quite fit together, but they don't chime 100% for me.
Yeah. Thank you. So first of all, we'll have a fortnightly meeting. So you'll see when you go into the hub, there's a facility for us to do a conference call. That'll be a hybrid of virtual and in-person meeting, and that will be made up. There'll be an improvement advisory group that will have John, our consultant responsible for patient safety, for example, is on that. So that will be the vehicle by which we do some of the benefits realisation and the tracking of the implementation, and will give us a focus on whether we're on or off track. So from that point of view, and then in terms of quality money, I think in a way it's Manjeet's point. I think over the course and the duration of some of these projects, they may or may not go on or off track on quality or money, and I think it's how we then play those relevant subcommittees in. So I think I fully expect some of these projects or programmes to go into the other subcommittees for that focus drill down as well, to give that assistance.
Thank you. Do you mind if I clarify? So one of our, it may not be listed as a strategic priority, but one of our strategic problems clearly will be the financial envelope. So I'm wondering how much the work will enable us, how much will it contribute to making sure that we achieve that financial envelope, as well as all the other things. And again, I appreciate the order of quality, patient first, the improvements will come, but how will we be sure this is getting us on track for that?
Just an example of number one priority that's listed on slide 12 is optimising the patient journey programme. So that's looking at, obviously there's the 3 bullet points there, but it's about reducing length of stay for our patients, both pre being declared medically fit for discharge and post, and that, and as we'll see later when we do discuss the financial plan, the crux of the financial plan is based upon delivering improved length of stay and a more effective discharge process, enabling us to consider descaling and decompressing those additional and accelerated beds that we've got. All those things sort of fit together. It's the right thing for patients, and it's the right thing within the financial envelope.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take a few more points, then we'll come back. Andy.
Thanks, David. Really good to see the structure of this mapped out. It's an exciting development. I just wonder what the external interface is, because for some of the projects that you've listed, there will be either hands or things that we've done, but to continue success, it needs something to happen outside our walls, or where we need to influence outside in order to achieve fully what we're trying to do. So I just wondered how that interface you envisage working.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really important point, isn't it? Because some of this, as you say, you know, the solutions for our problems today exist outside the four walls of this hospital. And so with that in mind, there is an improvement approach across the ICS, so that will feed naturally into this. And, you know, I fully suspect SROs of the individual programmes, you know, I already know, you know, for example, Rachel's, you know, really tied into the ICS on some of the things around elective care. And just coming back slightly on Steve's point, and building on what Paul said, we know if we still do things that don't add value to patients in the system, and sometimes in this organisation, and we know if we do the right things at the right time for people, then, you know, that not only is that better quality and better outcome, better experience, but we'll stop wasting the resource it takes to do those things that aren't value added. So I think there's an intrinsic link in both of those points.
Yeah, two points. I think just coming back to your question, Stephen, I think to some degree Paul's said what I was going to say, but in all, particularly the first two of which I'll be the SRO, there are lots of metrics that we can drive that absolutely will deliver a financial benefit. Length of stay, absolutely, as you say, if we can improve our theatre productivity and generate more elective recovery fund, then we improve the financial position of the trust. I think one of the bits of context that we've changed, it's linked to the faculty, but it sort of sits alongside it, is in our approach to FIP this year. So the way we ran FIP in the year just gone is that we had these big programmes running through the PMO, and the FIP targets were attached to that, and the divisions participated in those, but the accountability sat more centrally. Whereas what we're doing this year is that the full FIP target, other than the little corporate bits, has gone out to the divisions, and this will be largely the delivery vehicle for them, but the accountability sits with the divisions. If they can't deliver through these, they will come up with different ways to look at that. So it's just shifting, I think, that ownership and putting it out there with the divisions, which for me is a really, really important change. I think there's lots of opportunity here, and I'm really excited about this, and particularly the two programmes that I'll be the SRO for. I think it's probably fair to say that they are, although some of these programmes have been running for a while, we have to be realistic about the fact they haven't been delivering the impact that we need them to. They just haven't, and so we need a different approach, which is why I'm so pleased to see the approach faculty is taking, so we can get at both those quality benefits in terms of reduced length of stay or shorter waiting times, whatever it might be, and then tie that into the FIP programme.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's look forward to that later on this afternoon. Okay, so we're just going to have our patient story video now, which is a family's journey through neonatal intensive care. Specifically,
I'm going to highlight the Emily Harris Foundation, which some of you might have heard about, and Claire, founder, will introduce it far better than also she'll talk, and then Paul, who's been really closely linked, will be happy to add a bit more.
So I have the great honour of working on the neonatal unit, and with that comes a lot of emotions and feelings. When our parents come on their journey on the neonatal unit, it's usually quite unexpected. It's a very anxious time, a worrying time. It isn't what anybody has planned or even thought about when they're going to have a baby. So they often come, the babies are premature, and when they arrive with us, they are so worried. Parents are not sure what to expect and have never even been and seen the neonatal unit. Often they've had a look around labour suite, often they've had a look around the wards, but it isn't somewhere that they come to on a journey to look at. So when they first arrive, usually there are a gamut of emotions that are going through of what to expect, what's going to be around. We are lucky in that Emily Harris Foundation has supplies us with certain things to enhance the patient's journey.
My name is Claire Harris, and I run a charity called the Emily Harris Foundation, which supports the neonatal unit at Kingsmill Hospital. 16 years ago now, over 16 years ago, myself and my husband Neil had our first daughter, Emily. While we were pregnant, we found out that there was going to be lots of problems with Emily. She was diagnosed with a heart condition. She was having problems growing in the womb. And then towards the end of the pregnancy, I developed preeclampsia, which resulted in Emily being born 6 weeks early. She was actually born at the QMC. She was moved back to Kingsmill as our local hospital. So she spent a long time on the neonatal unit in what was then the Dukeris Centre. We had an amazing experience there. The staff were absolutely amazing. We were looked after so well. We got to take her home, which was fabulous, for 3 weeks over Christmas. And then she picked up an infection. So she came back into hospital. Got transferred to Leeds. She spent 4 weeks there and unfortunately passed away on the 1st of February 2007. After Emily died, we had a funeral, obviously. We collected money instead of flowers. We made the decision to donate that money to the neonatal unit here at Kingsmill. It's where we'd had the best connections with people. It's where we'd felt, most looked after. And we were totally overwhelmed by the response to that donation. And it made us think that perhaps there was something we could do on a bit of a longer term basis. So we had a chat to the staff there, and that's where the idea came from to set up the charity. And it's grown from there over the last 14 years.
So Lottie was born in November at 28 weeks. She came very early and surprised us. I was on my way to work. It was terrifying. It was really difficult. Needed the support of the NICU staff to get me through it. There was a few times where Lottie was really quite poorly and we wanted to be with her overnight. Emily Harris, they furnished the flats and the parents' room. It's like being at home in a clinical environment. The rooms that were furnished by them, it was comfortable, so my older daughter could come. She didn't always want to be sat at the bedside, she was quite frightened. So one of us could go and just be a normal family, sat in the family room. We could sit and have a hot meal, and that was all furnished out by the Emily Harris. Afterwards, I've really struggled emotionally, and I get the counselling which Emily Harris Foundation supports, and that's really helping me to get through this post experience of NICU.
So every family that comes onto the unit will be given a welcome pack, and that will contain things like nappies, blanket, bibs, cotton wool, the kind of things that they're going to need. Obviously, many families come on not expecting to be there. It's a very sudden experience. You don't plan for it.
She just gives so much to the unit. Every Wednesday, my husband was disappearing, and I thought, where's he going? It's like, is he going to watch football? But now we were sat talking to Claire, and I didn't realise that he needed that. It was one of the worst times of my life, but made so much better by them because they all really cared for us. The night that we went onto the ward, we were handed the pack from the Emily Harris Foundation. I didn't know I was going to have a baby that day, so I'd not got any really teeny tiny nappies, or we got handed a diary in that as well, which my elder daughter Minnie, I think she found that quite helpful because she wrote down her experience for Lottie, so Lottie can look back at it and see what Minnie went through. There was a nurse called Andrew, and he was amazing. Yeah, he was there during my delivery, and like a flash mob, they just came and took her away, and then when I saw her, she was all cleaned up and ventilated, and they'd sorted her, and yeah, they were like, she's going to be okay, it's going to be all right. Lottie's defied all the odds. She just flew into the world. £2.12 pocket rocket. I don't know how Claire does it. Losing a child on there and then going and giving all that support to parents. I don't know how she can face it because I don't think I could do it.
May have noticed Frankie's one of our ward sisters on the way to work, so it's really good. Our local hospital cares for our staff as well, as we often say. If you want to add anything?
Yeah, obviously Claire is a very, she's just phenomenal, the work that she does, but she does it very silently. So I think it's really important that we celebrate, because what we've tried to do is support Claire and extend out. So Claire is now working with Sarah Seddon, and they're both on the maternity and neonatal voice partnerships. She works in the system. She presented the cases, her stories through executive partners, because I think it's really important that it's about the whole experience and understanding. It's just not the nursing care that we provide, it's that whole wraparound care for the family whilst they're with us. And I think Claire's story and Neil's story is testament to the care that was provided over 16 years ago, that actually Emily wasn't born at Sherwood Forest and she didn't sadly pass away at Sherwood Forest, but the care that she received is the reason why she supports our unit, because it's what was important to her and what when I speak to her, it's about that was the happiest time that she had with Emily and that memory making, and that's what we really focus on as a team whilst they're on the neonatal unit, because it is that unexpected journey and it's about preparing parents, because you're never really prepared to becoming a parent. It is a life-changing experience, but having that brought forward or unexpected, it's another dimension. So Emily's there because she has that experience, and like I say, she does a coffee morning every Wednesday. So she sits in the parent flats. They've got a communal room in there, and she just sits and talks to parents. And it's just the support that she provides is phenomenal. And like I say, she does it. She just shrugs it off as that this is me, and she really enjoys it, and she just sees it as nothing extraordinary, whereas we actually do, and that's hence us bringing the board.
How much did she raise now? Is it?
£250,000. So this Christmas was a milestone, yeah. So just over £250,000 she's raised.
I think they had she had 2 runners in the London Marathon.
Yeah.
It's just happened raising.
She's got open post for the Great North Run as well. So anybody's a runner. Clearly not me. I support the other things, so I'm happy to do the race nights and anything else that she sponsors. But running is not my forte. But she's constantly looking at fundraising ideas. So local supermarkets, the coins that you can donate in Tesco's, our local ones. Recently, she's just been awarded some funding from that. So she's community-wise, she's out there constantly fundraising. But she's just such a, and Claire knows her well. We've met her multiple times on our Safety Champions walk around when we bumped into her, and she's always up to something, looking for a new way to raise funds. So I just think it was a good story to bring and see how Emily, not just for Frankie, but for Frankie's husband and also her children, how that journey's been made special, and it's just that combined nursing care and also the support from the foundation.
Thank you, and I think that is a fantastic patient story video, and looks at not just the perspective of patients that are on this and our staff, but also the wider involvement in the community. So thanks to Claire and to Neil and to the Emily Harris Foundation for everything that they do to continue to support us, and it really is quite a magnificent amount of money that they have raised for this trust and for our patients. So thank you. Okay, if no further comments, I'm going to take a break now. Let's give you 10, we're getting 10, it's 15. Let's call it 15:15. Because I know it's been a long morning. Let's call it 11:15, and we'll be back and move on to our single oversight framework. Let's go and do the marathon now. Yeah.
I've got.
Yes.
If you want to, might read.
No, I was sitting on the white.
Okay, welcome back to the Public Board of Directors meeting for Sherwood Forest Hospitals Trust. We've had a good conversation and discussion this morning, and we are going to continue with that as we move on to our single oversight framework performance and the quarterly report. So can I hand over to you, Paul, for you to take us through it with the executive?
Okay, thank you. Yes, this is the single oversight framework report, in effect our performance report for the final quarter of the financial year that ended on the 31st of March. As we can recall, very challenging period, very challenging quarter, winter, rising COVID prevalence, and indeed the first part of that industrial action that we noted earlier. So it's 54 standards that we report on. 16 are rated red, 14 amber, 23 green, with one that doesn't have a rating at this time. So I'll invite my executive colleagues to give an overview, a little bit more detail as we go through the domains. We start with the quality care domain and hand over to Dave, Medical Director, and to Phil, our Chief Nurse.
Thank you. I'm going to continue the theme of the morning and leave it all to Phil.
They will take questions. So as Paul said, this is a Q4 report. I'm not wanting to repeat what Paul said about some of the context there, but it was an extremely pressure time yet again, which resulted in significant waits across our pathways, including the emergency care pathway. We've continued to have additional capacity open to support that, which has presented strain and pressure for our hospital, clearly been the right approach to keep our patients safe and accommodated in the right areas. Again, a significant period of pressure. There's 4 areas off track that I want to draw to board's attention. I'll start with patient safety incidents and stars reportable incidents. No events during this period. 7 stars reportable, which are listed in the report there, and they will be managed to our usual process. I think a key bit to note is we're starting to transition over to the PSERF, Patient Safety Incident Response Framework, which we've mentioned before, and we will be doing a board development session in June to make board aware of what this means to us as a board and what changes the process actually involve. And the transition plan has been shared and it is followed closely through Quality Committee. But it fits with David's discussion about the faculty, because this is going to be looking at thematic reviews, shared learning and improvement, which is the approach, the safety approach we really want to move towards. So I think this will be some of our work closely with the faculty. MRSA bacteremia, this remains red, but that's due to a rolling position. We've not had a positive case since July 2020. I'll just move on to the COVID onset. We started the quarter with an increase prevalence in COVID rates, and that followed the regional and national pattern. That said, we only had 3 outbreaks in Q4 compared to 13 that time last year. Rates have continued to drop weekly over the last few months. No current outbreaks in the organisation, and you may be aware that a new national guidance was launched on April the 1st, which was about starting to live with COVID, next steps. We've taken a usual measured and cautious approach to not just jump in and change everything straight away. We've continued to monitor our levels in our organisation locally, and we've made some step changes, reducing testing across some of our pathways and just focusing on high risk areas. Our plan now is to fully transition alongside the national guidance next week on the 9th of May. What that means here is we'll only be testing patients in high risk groups, which is what we would have done pre-COVID, how we manage respiratory illnesses, and we'll be removing mask wearing except for people who choose to wear one. So it's really important we give people that choice. Again, except in certain high risk areas and conditions. So really what we're doing is moving towards how we operated pre-COVID, how we managed respiratory conditions and diseases, which we've always done. And we think that sort of stepped approach, Dave, is the right approach to take our teams with us, make sure we communicate it adequately. A lot of engagement with divisions, and we make sure that DLT, making sure that our teams are on board and help us shape this transition. But as with other changes we've made, it's a big cultural shift for our staff. Dave, if you want to supplement anything.
The only thing I was going to just highlight, the PSERF work is really interesting because it's such a significant change for us. and we've been really quite nervous about how some of our partners externally will react to that, and will they move to the new way of working at the same time that we do. I think my reflection is that actually when we've engaged with them, I've been really surprised how keen they are. So the CQC keen to move to a different way of thinking, you know, the ICB different way of thinking, and even in discussions with our coronal colleagues, very keen to move to a more thematic approach and understanding. So the proof will be in the pudding, I guess, as we get into all of those forums. But it's very positive, I think, from that point of view.
Let's take any questions.
Any questions? No? Okay. That level of assurance.
The only thing I would just say in terms of Steve, you were talking about the impact. So I know I mentioned it a few times, but the VTE and the EPMA. So when we started the EPMA project, the VTE metrics weren't a core component of where we set it up right at the beginning. But as we developed it, it became one of those things. So it's one of those, you know, subjective things that we can add in that makes a massive difference. And it's, you know, you're talking about how we are.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So move over to Rob Simcox, our Director of People for the People and Culture domain.
Thank you, Paul. Morning, board members. Morning, colleagues joining us either in the room or virtually. So you've got the people metrics in front of you. This is at Q4 and captures the reporting period of January, February, March. I'll build on Phil's comment really around it's been a challenging period, industrial action throughout that period, and some significant pressure the organisation's faced. Of the 13 reportable indicators, 2 flag as red. I'll come on and talk a little bit about those. 4 flag as amber, and the remaining are positive at green. The 2 areas that flag as red, the first area, and it'd be remiss of me not to mention the flu vaccination programme. This is in regards to frontline uptake. Q4 saw the end of the campaign. We ended at 62%, lower than last year. I think it's fair to say, and certainly follows a national downturn in uptake. What I can confirm, we have performed significantly better than the national average and better than our system partners. Where we are as it stands today is starting to plan for this year's campaign and learning on what we were able to hear from our people across the campaign, and some of those themes were around making sure easy access, and going back to basics. What people were describing is they didn't often want 2 vaccines at the same time. But as much as we thought it was a good idea to have co-administration of flu and COVID vaccine, individuals want that separately and in their own time. So we'll build on that. I wanted to touch on compliance around appraisals. We have seen a quarterly decline. Some of the main reasons for that are operational pressures that we've seen across the organisation and individuals wanting time for meaningful conversations. What I can confirm, we have started to pilot new paperwork to make those conversations as meaningful as possible, building on national staff survey themes, and we're also exploring some e-based opportunities to capture learning outcomes. And the final bit, I thought I'd end on a positive, which is around some of our mandatory statutory training compliance. We've seen 2 of the 3 months at 90%, which recognising some of the challenges we've seen, we're now in hopefully a sustained position of returning back to pre-pandemic compliance levels around mandatory statutory training. And there's been 2 main reasons for that. The first around some really strong collaborative work with teams under Phil and Dave's leadership around resetting some of that mandatory offer, but more importantly, portability. So we've had some great collaboration with system partners around accessing learning from all of our organisations, and that being portable around new starters. And I'll pause there. David, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about any of the improvement metrics before opening up for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So it's good that we've trained nearly 296 people in QSA over the last 12 months, but I think it just kind of builds on the conversation we've had so far around value and purpose. So what I'll be undertaking as part of the faculty is a formal review of the CUSA training, the tools, techniques, the length of time that the training and the value that it adds to do that fit for purpose test. And then one of the other things we'll be doing is building an improvement community and linking it into the work of some of the teams under Phil's leadership around the clinical governance activities, because there's a real barrier for reporting improvement projects. It says 55 on the soft, but we all know in this room there are far more, localized improvement projects that are underway, and one of the barriers is somebody having the time to go into a system and report it. So through the faculty we'll be looking at ways of capturing the activity that happens, reviewing the training and building a CUSA community approach. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Questions?
Okay. Question now.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, no, man.
Sorry, I'm
Sorry.
mindful of time. So can I use the opportunity to say I was particularly really struck by the reduction in the vacancy rate. Q2 we were 5%, Q3 3.8%, and then in March 3.3%, considering the system average of 12.5%. And it would be good to talk further about what's really driven it. I'd like to think that the events fairs, especially where we're seeing so much engagement, interest by people who may not have been aware of us and so on, but it would be good to see some of that evaluation and tangible evidence. So excellent news.
I'll pop that
Let's
into
learn
the
more from it.
people committee item if that helps, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving to the timely care domain and Chief Operating Officer Rachel Eddy.
Thank you. So I'll pull out some key highlights from the reports. If I start on emergency care, so as Phil has already described, Q4 saw a significant pressure, sort of starting towards the end of Q3, but then running right the way through into January and February, and culminating in a critical incident over the New Year period and for the first few weeks of January. We opened 74 additional surge beds over and above our normal bed base. So that isn't just what we'd normally describe as escalation beds. That was opening beds in the cath lab, in endoscopy, on the medical day case unit. So not clinic environments that any of us would choose to be looking after overnight patients in, but necessary to mitigate the level of pressure we were seeing. And we're seeing continued high levels of occupancy and continued high levels of medically safe throughout that period. That also resulted in us having to repurpose a couple of our elective wards over that period as well, which has obviously had a knock-on effect then to the elective programme. I think despite that, from the dashboard, you can see that actually we managed to more or less hold our 4-hour performance throughout that period, which I think is a credit to teams, and in part due to that extra support that we do put into ED to make sure that we can keep on top of the patients that need to be seen as well as the patients that we're caring for whilst they're waiting for beds. We also remain one of the sort of consistently in the top 2 in terms of performance on ambulance handovers in the system, and as people are aware, that is a nationally a metric that people are very, very concerned about, and we continue to benchmark extremely well on that. So despite the pressures on teams and the impact on our patients and I think the almost exclusive focus on the emergency pathway, particularly in the sort of first month of Q1, I think it's a credit to the organisation that we have actually managed to maintain, reasonably good performance relative to peers in some of those key emergency pathway metrics. If I move on to the elective pathway, so the planning guidance target was for us to achieve 0 78-week waits by the end of March. We didn't quite make that. We ended up with only one patient that I would describe as truly a Sherwood patient, who was a patient who chose to delay their treatment longer, and another 7 patients that we'd taken from NUH as mutual aid in ear, nose and throat, who'd come to us too late on the pathway for us to realistically treat within 78 weeks. They will all be treated now, but we've got a constant rolling programme now of taking patients from NUH because the waits are so different that we're accepting long ones here. In time we may shift the reporting of those and they may take, but for the moment they sit in our position. I can't assure that we're completely clear of the 78 weeks yet. We're in sort of single figures at month end, but we're not far away, I think, from getting consistently below that. And really, there is only one specialty at the moment that I'm particularly concerned about in terms of maintaining that position. And that is cardiology as opposed to the surgical specialties that you might expect it to be. But we're doing a bit of a deep dive into some of the issues there. On outpatients, we've recently relaunched our transformation programme around outpatients, and although it's not really reflected in the report, we're seeing some early signs of some really good improvement there. So good reduction in DNA rates, good improvement in clinic slot utilisation. But the metric we track in the SOC is around the reduction of the 25% of follow-ups, which is a national standard. We're not achieving that. I don't think we will achieve that, and we've been clear across the system that we won't achieve that standard. It's one of the few planning targets that we haven't signed up to as a system, because both ourselves and Nottingham are carrying large overdue review lists of these patients who are due a follow-up appointments and haven't been seen in a timely manner. We have to clear those before we start looking at reducing follow-up appointments. Conversely, though, the key action that is expected to drive reduction in follow-ups nationally is implementation of PIFU, patient-initiated follow-up, so where patients can take control of when they come back. And actually, Sherwood, we outperform our peers on that. We've the national standard and we're better than many other organisations, and we have further to go in that there are specialties that currently don't apply PIFU but are keen to get on board with that programme. So there is some positive there, but we're just not seeing it in this particular metric for the reasons I've explained. And then I'll also finish on a positive. Again, you don't see it much in the dashboard because it's green and therefore you don't get escalations, but I think we have a very positive story to tell around cancer. So in Q4, we achieved the 2-week rate standard for the first time in 2 years. For the faster diagnosis standard, which is for patients to receive a diagnosis within 28 days of referral. We're only one of 2 trusts in the Midlands achieving that standard. And our 62-day backlog reduction is exceeding our trajectory. And as a percentage of our total PTL, we have the lowest proportional backlog within the Midlands as well. So although I don't think it comes across in the SOF, I think that is something we should be really, really proud of. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Just one relatively minor, I think, but because there's a lot of really positive news in that, despite all the pressures we've been under. We're just looking again at outpatients in terms of that remote attendances percentage, which just seems flat. And for me, there's a real opportunity to try and increase and push that. Just showing divisions benchmarking information, I'm not sure does it. It's about getting us to be a top performer in this area. And if anything, we slip back a little bit rather than moving forward.
Yeah, I totally agree, Graham. It's one of the areas that I've asked the team to really focus on in the revised improvement programme. I think, to be completely fair, amongst all of the other pressures, this isn't one that we've absolutely prioritised over the past 6 or 9 months. And it's not been driven, if I'm honest, by feedback from our patients. So we've done surveys around the patients that do present about whether they prefer to be seen remotely. There isn't a strong theme there. Now, I've pushed back on that a bit because I think it's the patients who perhaps aren't being seen yet that potentially would like that opportunity. Once they're here, they'll probably say, yeah, the appointment was fine. So I think there's some work to be done there. Definitely something around clinical engagement. So we know we saw very high rates during COVID out of necessity, but that has absolutely slipped right back. And I think it's probably slipped more back at Sherwood than certainly when I was in Nottingham, we were at a higher level than this. What I don't know yet is that about the fact that we're not making it easy enough for people. So this is about the technology. Is it easy both for the clinician and the patient to have that appointment, for everything to go smoothly, for for them to be brought in at the appropriate time, for the appointment to be outcomed appropriately and all those sorts of things. So there's something about the technology, I think. And then there's something about what is clinically appropriate for each specialty. And again, what I'm encouraging the teams to do is to stop seeing this as a 25% target across the trust, but to agree what is a clinically achievable target in each specialty. It might be 2% in one specialty and 40% in another. And I don't think we've got to that level of granularity of understanding what the art of the possible is for both the clinicians and the patients at a specialty level. Once we've done that, we can assess whether that gets us up to the target at trust level. But I think we're being a bit too top down at the moment, in my view. So I think it's early days. I'm going to be honest about the fact that in the melee of all the pressures around emergency care, the work we've done trying to reduce cancer backlogs and very long elective waits, I don't think this has been one of the areas that we've really focused on. But now that we've relaunched that programme, it absolutely will be.
Andy.
So sort of follow on from that, Rachel, so I think the 4 specialties you've highlighted as contributing to the outpatient backlog and the follow-up issue, I'm not surprised about at all. But I do wonder if there's something about that detail that you just described on the virtual follow-up, because I'd want really to be clear about 6-month and 12-month follow-ups in that cohort. i.e., are we following them because that's what we've always done? Is a different model required? I know in ophthalmology we've done a lot of work about alternative models, but are we really using them? Are they working? Because at the end of the day, a conversation we had earlier, this is resource. And if it's in this particular part of our trust, we could use it somewhere else. So I think it's probably quite an important thing to try and unpick this year.
Yeah, and the overdue review issue, which actually the overdue review issue, the overdue follow-ups and the what we call ASIs, which is I won't explain, the acronym doesn't help you really, but it's the patients who are sitting in a pile waiting for first appointment. Those are the 2 backlogs that concern me most, and yet nationally they're not monitored like the things you'll see on here. But that worries me far more than the 78 weeks, because the 78 weeks of patients we know about, we know what they need, we're tracking them and we're keeping them safe even if we haven't got the capacity, whereas the ASIs and overdue reviews are the sort of undifferentiated that are, you know, so I am having a real focus on that at the minute. And also it's been recently through Patient Safety Committee, I think, to sort of recognise that risk, and I'm always very clear with the specialties that they need to have clear risk assessments, which will include some of that risk stratification around, well, do you need to see every patient at 4 months? Can some wait a bit longer, but actually others need to be seen absolutely on time, and how we manage that. So I completely agree. I think it's got to be an area that we need to really focus on going forward.
Okay.
Well, just a couple of comments. So I entirely agree with your challenge and pushback. And I think that, you know, it's just time is right to do that. In terms of ophthalmology, just to bring board's attention, we were written up in the applications from the Royal College of Ophthalmologists just in the last month as being an exemplar of our patient initiative follow-up, and we are hosting a webinar nationally about what we've done.
Yeah. Brilliant. Excellent. Good. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So our domain is best value care, and over to Rich Mills, the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Paul. So yeah, for the financial year, the trust managed to deliver its financial plan, which was originally a £4.7 million deficit, and actually exceed it by about 700,000. So we ended up with a deficit of 3.9 million. As my colleagues have described, it was a significantly challenging quarter, and many of the pressures that we faced throughout the year continued into Q4 from a financial point of view as well. We were successful though in securing some additional allocation, some surge funding that helped to offset some of those costs that we'd experienced all year, which is why we ended up at the £3.9 million position. If you'd have taken that out, we'd have been at an £11.5 million deficit. That was static from where we were at the end of Q3. So at the end of Q3, we discussed some of the actions that we were trying to take to manage the financial position and mitigate some of the pressures that we'd faced all year, and we did have some success in that in Q4. The capital position for the financial year, it's a bit of an odd one. It shows as a red on the metric because the metric is measured against plan. We were significantly over plan. The reason we were significantly over plan was because we secured additional income, additional capital support for some very exciting schemes that we all know about. So we've spent additional money in relation to the Community Diagnostic Centre, the theatre development at Newark, Discharge Lounge, for example. So all of those contribute to that overall capital programme. In terms of the original plan and the share of the system allocation of capital, that was all spent in full and delivered. The agency position was the other one that shows as a red, and this is direct link to the additional capacity that we've had open throughout 22-23, which has largely been staffed on a temporary basis. Our year-end agency expenditure was 18.2 million, which represents just about 5.7% of our total pay. We have managed to make some good progress around agency usage, particularly in compliance with some of the rules that NHS England set out. So we've reduced the number of hours that are either off framework or breach the price caps, the published price caps. We've managed to reduce those on a quarterly basis throughout 22-23. We have an ambition to carry that on as we move through 23-24, and through some other actions within our plan. We also have a planned reduction in our overall agency expenditure through the year. The only other one I was going to comment on, and comes back to Graham's point earlier when we talked about the priorities, is the financial improvement programme. So it is marked as a green, it is marked as delivered, but as Graham mentioned earlier, it was largely delivered on a non-recurrent basis and a number of fortuitous underspends throughout the year against budgets. That does give us a pressure as we move into 23-24, and picks that up in the Finance Committee, and we'll continue to review progress against that.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Okay, that concludes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move now to the governance section of our board agenda, and go to Shirley for the use of the trust seal.
Thank you. Seeking approval from the board in accordance with Standing Order 10 of the application of the trust official seal applied on 13th of April to the documents identified, and we do retrospective approval. If everybody's okay with that, or got any questions?
Happy to approve. Yes.
Thank you. The next one we'll be really keen on. So this is an annual report, the fit and proper person requirement. So just to confirm that, as defined by the CQC, you are all fit and proper. Thank you for doing your annual returns, and so they're all completed and they're all in the folders in my office if anybody wants to see them. So it's just for assurance. Thank you.
Tidying up all of those little bits there, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes. Very good. Provider license self-certification.
Okay, so this is an annual thing. We have to self-certify against our provider license. The conditions as identified, so G6, FT4 and COS7, which is just to say we are compliant with our license and all the governance arrangements, and that we have the resources to continue operating for another year. We used to have to return this to NHSE. We don't have to do that anymore, but we do have to publish it on our website. So we do this via the board papers. Provider licence has been updated from April 2023, and it now covers both FTs and non-FT trusts. I can't see, having read the revised licence, that there's any removal of this self-assessment. We might need to keep an eye on the guidance, but anyway, this relates to 22-23, but we would be good to do it again. So again, that's here for approval. The executives have approved it, so it's just here for board approval. Happy with it?
Happy to approve. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. On to assurance from subcommittees, and we'll start with audit, Rem.
Thank you very much. We met on 20th April. This was largely a year-end tracking meeting in progress. I think it's fair to reflect that everything is progressing well towards doing all our year-end processes, whether it be accounts or reports. A couple of bits I just really wanted to highlight. One of them, internal audit. We haven't got the head of internal audit opinion yet, primarily because there are still 3 core audits outstanding, but they have said we've got significant assurance around our BAF, which is really good again. We've got moderate assurance around our implementation of recommendations from internal audit reports. Slightly better than last year in terms of the percentage, but still below the 75 we want to attain to and get back to. So that's something that will be a key focus for this year, as a warning to everybody, to keep on top of those. On the other side of that, in terms of the finance team when producing the accounts this year, they're a whole week ahead of schedule and put them across, which is absolutely brilliant and very much appreciated, I know, by our external auditors as well. But I think shows how much work goes into that beforehand, but also how well our finance team is working. And just one other bit to flag up, which was something that Barbara raised, and I think is a very valid point, which is recognising around, we've done an awful lot of discussion around the direct impacts of industrial action, but it's the indirect impacts as well, and how I think, has that had any impact that we need to be aware of and concerned around? And things like that are around, we cancelled all meetings. Has there been any knock-on impact of that as a consequence in any elements, whether it's governance or safety or otherwise? And perhaps it's something we ought to reflect on at some point. So they were the bits I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. And just to add my thank you to the team for producing the draft annual accounts. We're currently going through the external audit process with our auditors at the moment, and the final accounts will be due to go back to audit in June for board sign off as well in June.
Brilliant. Then also on here is the report for the year as well. Nothing particular I want to highlight in there, but really just there for everybody. And if there are any comments, happy to take.
Any comments? Thank you. Thank you, Graham. On to Finance Committee, Andrew.
Thank you, Claire. We had our meeting on the 25th of April. A couple of things I'd like to highlight from that meeting. First of all, the PR4, which is the delivery of financial strategy, we'd increase it at the previous finance meeting from 16 to 20. We reviewed it at that time and decided it would leave it at 20 until the financial environment was more clear, shall we say. We recognise there's a lot of ambition in the plan, and we'll review it at the next Finance Committee meeting. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the PR8. We reviewed that, which is the green plan, and decided that would remain that as it is at the moment. Rich has already alluded to the monthly finance report and meeting the year-end position, and I'd like to also thank the finance team for achieving that. Other than that, we delegated the powers for the 2023 financial plan to the finance team and chief exec to approve, so it can be submitted on time for the ICB to submit today, which is the 4th of May, so midday I think it was. Other than that, there's no further things I'd like to say. Would you like to add, Rich?
No, I don't think there's anything further to add.
Okay. There's also the end of the year report as well, which I assume has been read. I don't think there's anything I want to add to that either.
Just one question on that. We're only showing 2 non-execs on the attendance form, on the attendance table.
The chair and the vice chair.
Chair and the vice chair.
Oh yes, oh, missed that. Sorry. That'll be corrected.
Okay, thank you. Quality Committee, Barbara.
So again, take the paper as read, and won't repeat what Graham said, which we raised about the indirect impacts industrial action. Some clear decisions and progress. So several sign-offs were made. So we approved a couple of the must-do actions, which were a legacy from 2020. So that's no mean feat 3 years later, but we did it. And 2 of the must-do actions from the more recent maternity inspection, CQC inspection. So that was positive. No change to the risk rating. We had quite a discussion about some of the work to explore what might happen surgically at the Newark site. And I know discussions are happening within the trust about that. but there's some further work needed around policy risk assessment, but good to see that that's constantly being explored about what could be in scope for provision there. There was a 360 report on nutrition and hydration, which came back with limited assurance, but on the back of that, there's some really good work now going on around nutrition and hydration, and actually that's not just going to cover patients, but it'll also cover visitors and staff. So quite a comprehensive piece of work on that, which I think is, you know, very positive. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
And in a similar way to other colleagues, there's an annual report from the Quality Committee, which was approved virtually. We had quite a short meeting because it was in the middle of the industrial action.
Okay, that's fine. No further comments or questions. We'll move on to charitable funds, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of things to highlight in terms of matters of concerns around finishing projects that potentially damage the credibility of the fundraising activities. We have a way forward with that, so I want to escalate it, but we have a route agreed. Good news around approving a couple more ultrasound machines for same-day emergency care, where people can be waiting, I believe, a day or two as opposed to the required 4 hours waiting time. So we hope that will make a significant difference and a good demonstration of the work of the charitable fund committee people. Other than that, the only thing I wanted to highlight was we obviously said goodbye to Shirley, who's been a great supporter of the trust, and that was very strongly recognised by the people on it as well, and also Tracy Brassington as well. It was her last charitable funds committee, and again I'd like to just reflect thanks to both of those people. And as we know, Tracy's driven this hugely successfully and has been the life force of it, and we'll need to continue in that trend. So, if there's any other questions?
Yes. Sure.
It's a genuine question because I've been here a year ago, so I've not seen this report before. But when I read it, I was surprised. There's nothing in here about the finances of what have we raised in the year, what have we spent in the year, are we sitting on money that we should be investing? And I don't know if that comes somewhere else, but
no, that's okay, and that's something we could include. What I put on the highlight report is just that we've seen that and the committee's seen that and are assured by it. We're also the corporate trustees, so we'll be in meetings where we will see that. I'm up for more information if that would be helpful, or whether that's sufficient for you. So are you thinking particularly for the quadrant report or
for the annual report, I suppose, that we've raised?
Oh, sorry, I haven't moved on to that yet. No, I'm with you though. Okay.
Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, no, sorry.
I meant on the annual report. Yeah.
That would seem like a sensible thing to
Yeah.
include. Yeah,
Just
thank
to say, we did agree, I don't know if it's on the quadrant report, that we would, the corporate trustee would receive some training about how we invest money we hold in charitable funds.
Yes, we proposed that both the corporate trustee and potentially the council of governors, if interested, might benefit from a presentation on that. So that's true. Yes, thank you, Rachel. Good spot.
I think that would be good, to be able to give some sight for the public to what we do raise through charitable funds. And I have to say that, you know, every week I am signing letters of thanks to the members of the public who have donated money, sometimes small sums of money that they have come in and donated through the volunteers hub downstairs, as just as a recognition and thanks for the service that they have received. And other times because they have donated, perhaps instead of having flowers at a relative's funeral, or through active fundraising in other ways. And you know, we really are very, very lucky in our community to have such a generous and supportive community raising funds. And I think you're right that we should acknowledge that more generally. Yes, Shirley.
I think when the community involvement team do their quarterly report, it's all in there. We usually include that in the reading room when it aligns with the charitable funds. So it may be that we just use that and then bring that together. But I'll speak to Deb and we'll take that forward.
Great.
Thank you.
And just adds the board's thanks to Tracy as well for the work that she has done over the last few years. She's really driven so much of the voluntary work and the charitable work that goes on here, and she will be very sad to see her go. So thank you to Tracy on behalf of the whole board. Yes.
But just sort of building on Rachel's point, and yeah, we didn't think about it within the committee, but I think having something at the back of the annual one, saying a bit about not just the amount we've raised, but just as importantly, what it's been spent on, and how it's been used and what we've delivered from it as a summary, I think would be really good for communication purposes too.
Then we could easily do that from that community.
Yeah, we can, because that was a really good report as well.
Excellent. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So we're now on to the outstanding service video, and we've got a video on successfully relaunching the 24/7 home births. This one. Yeah, Sally, are you going to sit and cry next to me as well sometimes?
Hello, my name is Mel and I'm here today to tell you about the successful relaunch of our home birth service. You will hear from a birthing person who has had a successful home birth and a staff member who has facilitated this. From the 19th of September 2022, we successfully reinstated our service. We ensured that we took time to spend with staff and listen to their worries and fears. We also ensured the safety of our birthing person. So we made sure that our staffing and retention was at adequate levels to provide a 24-hour cover for the home birth service. We looked at putting on home birth workshops that allowed staff to look at the latest guidelines and policies and procedures that was in place, discuss situations and run through scenarios. We also ensured that we did a kit restock drop-in, ensuring that all staff carried the same equipment to deal with anything faced at home birth. We worked alongside the practice development midwives and looked at quick reference guides to deal with emergency situations within the community setting. All midwives carried these within their home birth kits. After listening to staff, we decided to send out 2 midwives from the onset of labour to the birthing person. This gave the midwives the support and confidence they required. When writing rosters, it was a high priority to ensure that an experienced midwife within the home birth setting was allocated to a midwife who felt less confident in this area. I am pleased to tell you, since the relaunch of our home birth service, we have had 16 successful home births.
Hello, I'm Lee Butterworth and this is Buddy, who is 3 months old. So I had a home birth in January 2023. I've also got a 2.5-year-old little boy as well. I would have liked a home birth with him if possible, but at the time during COVID we couldn't have a home birth, it wasn't available. I chose to have a home birth because my mum had a home birth with my brother, who's actually 17 years younger than me, and I was present at that birth and I was in my own home comfort, so it meant that I had the television on, I had the lights dimmed, I had music on, I had a pool birth that I'd hired that I wanted as well. I was able to have family round, which I couldn't have in my first birth. I finally got in the pool at around 5 o'clock in the morning and I delivered at 6 o'clock in the morning with 2 midwives here who then stayed until I delivered the placenta at home as well. There was no sort of mess at home as well, so everything was covered. The midwives did everything. They got everything set for Buddy in the other room for us, all the medication that was needed. They'd got all of the cleaning products, the scrubs. They took everything away back to the hospital for me. The first midwife came and helped me within the pool. They offered my partner to cut the cord. They were very guided by me. He only sort of intervened when needed. I did have a discussion with my midwife at what point how late would it be within the birth that I needed to be rushed into the hospital. She assured me that they have the team know in hospital, they know how many, that the home birth is happening. We did an examination every 15 minutes. So she checked my pulse, baby's heartbeat, heart rate, things like that. And yeah, they came round beforehand just to sort of assess the environment to make sure that it was suitable. On the Badger app, you're able to write down your birth plan. With Badger Notes, it helped me to understand what the midwife was saying better than what was written in the book. I felt safe and reassured the whole time. My biggest concern was what if Buddy came out and he wasn't breathing, which my midwife had reassured me that she's done a lot of home births. She delivered my brother 17 years ago, so at home.
As a midwife, it really is a privilege to attend births in people's homes. It's a very special experience, and families really do love the experience of birthing at home in their own setting. They feel very comfortable and well supported by 2 midwives in their own home.
I would highly recommend having a home birth. You're in your own environment. It helps with the birth because you become more relaxed.
Consider a home birth. Birthing at home can be a really amazing experience. You're attended by 2 qualified midwives, and everything happens in your own setting, so it can be a very lovely experience. So if that's something that you think might be for you, speak to your midwife.
Thanks for being a big part of that, Buddy, anyway.
Just hope it pulls together some of the monthly reports we give at board, particularly when it was paused and a driver national extended to restart it. We weren't going to restart it when we considered all the safety, quality aspects and the views of our midwives who were very anxious about restarting it. That sums it up.
Excellent. Very good. Well, thank the team for all the work they've done on that, and really good to see Leanne and Buddy particularly decided being centre of attention was a little tiring and boring at one point. So okay, thank you. On to communications to the wider organisation. What do you think, Paul?
Okay, thank you. So if you made a few notes, so publicising the governor elections on the 26th of May and our excellence awards coming on the 5th of July. Making a really big fuss and saying thank you and farewell to Shirley and indeed Tracy Brassington, as we noted later on, and welcoming Sally. We welcomed the maternity parent voice champion report. I think that was one of those key moments in the discussion that we had earlier, and thank the team for successful smoking outcomes as well. The launch of the improvement faculty this afternoon. Really important in our patient story. So there was a journey through NICU, but the immense impact that Claire Harris has personally, and indeed through the Emily Harris Foundation. We'll note that. Good Q4 performance despite the challenges of increased demand, increased COVID prevalence and industrial action, and a thank you to everyone in the organisation who's contributed through that. And then note at the end the outstanding service video and the successful relaunch of the 24-hour home birthing service, clearly, and the healthy, active body that was demonstrated in there as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. In terms of any other business, first of all, perhaps Shirley, would you just run through the timetable for the governor's elections, so
yeah, so
that for public?
Yeah, I think it's important. So the notice of elections will go live on Wednesday, the 10th of May, next Wednesday. Deadline for receipt of nominations. So anyone who's wants to be a governor must already be a member of the trust. Deadline for receipt is Friday the 26th of May, and then all those statements will be published on Tuesday the 30th of May. And then the poll will open on the 13th of June, so when you will be able to vote for your chosen governor from those nominations, and it will close on Thursday the 6th of July. So we'll declare the result on Friday the 7th of July, so just to make that clear to anyone who's listening.
Great, thank you. And in a final piece of any other business, can I just add my thanks to Shirley? Because you joined, I think, a month before I did. So so you leave me as the last person standing here as the longest serving. But throughout that time, you've provided huge amounts of advice, support, guidance and friendship. And thank you for that, especially as I moved into chair role. So thank you very much. And we wish you well with all of your plans for the future and for retirement.
Yes,
and
thank you.
we hope that you will continue to watch us and
every
see
month.
what we do. I expect to see you logging on.
I'll be there.
Looking forward to your questions, Shirley.
And if you could, it would be really helpful if you just continue to challenge on that soft for us and make sure that we're doing the right things. Thank you. I'm not aware of any other business. And so I'll close the meeting. The date of the next meeting is the 1st of June. Having closed the meeting, questions from members of the public. And we've got two of our governors with us today.
With my neuroclass one, you would expect, following on from the discussions about staffing and the difficulty in particular of getting whole teams together, Newark theatres. Last time I was on Meet Your Governor, a list was cancelled because there were no east of this. And several members of staff have said to me it'll make a lovely coffee lounge. So I have a concern about whether we're going to be able to raise the crew to actually run that place and use it effectively. But it's a concern which is part of the broader concern. So if there's anyone which wants to respond specifically about how you can make sure New York works, otherwise it's just a concern.
Okay, well, Rachel,
I can start and maybe don't want to come in. So I couldn't agree more. I think we're very aware of the underutilisation of the Newark theatres at the moment, and some of it is absolutely influenced by the difficulties we described in recruiting anaesthetists. I think what sometimes happens is because some of the more urgent work will be happening at Kingsmill. If we're short on a day, then people get pulled across. So it's not great for Newark or for the patients there. But if it's a cancer list here versus a routine list, so you can see why that happens. So I mean, Dave's already described some of the work we're doing around recruitment. Then we had a discussion with the division in the last week around sort of trying to come up with a more comprehensive workforce plan around this. So some of the ideas that have already been discussed in terms of joint posts with other organisations, as one example. But you're absolutely right that anaesthetic resource is our biggest constraint at the moment in terms of elective recovery, and it isn't just in terms of the, from my point of view, clearing the backlogs, getting patients seen more quickly. It's the impact on the staff who are over there, who just want to be busy, don't they, and seeing patients. So yeah, totally understand the issue. I think there's a lot of work to do to see how we can bridge that gap. It's not an easy one to solve though, or we would have solved it by now, I think. Dave, do you want to?
No, I don't think there's anything to add. I think we like you are aware of it, have some concerns, and we'll work to make sure that we address those.
Yes, Sue.
Just a comment really. For years I've been concerned when we've seen staff survey that we're always very, very low on staff being in fear of violence. And I was very pleased to see that something is happening about that.
Okay. I don't know whether you want to add anything to that, Rob, in terms of...
I think what David's been able to do in his role as strategy and partnership director has been able to create additional links across mid-Nottinghamshire, bringing people together to enable myself and others to start to describe the challenges we have. And what was a very constructive conversation only a few weeks ago is giving us a platform that perhaps previously we haven't had.
Thank you. There's no other questions pertaining to our agenda today. I'd therefore like to move the resolution to the closed session of the meeting. In accordance with Section 1, Part 2 of Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960, members of the board are invited to resolve that representatives of the press and other members of the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting, having regard to the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, publicity on which would be prejudicial to the public interest. I thank our governors for attending. We'll take 5 minutes and then we'll come back and just start private board before we break for lunch.
Thank you.